Hello, listeners, and welcome to this week's episode of The Cult Vault. This is the final instalment of February's Scientology coverage, and I have another interview for you all. Today I speak with Kara, who offers us insight into the many levels of operation within Scientology, how they overlap, and how they exploit. A quick thank you to anyone who has followed me on Twitter and Instagram last week at CultVaultPod. Every follow is so helpful. And another thank you to my patrons, subscribers, and those who have installed the Cult Vault app from the Google Play Store. I'm so thankful for all of this support. But for now, here is Kara. So hi Kara, and thank you so much for joining us on the show today. We're going to be rounding up our Scientology month with this final interview. And a bit like Fred's interview, we're going to be looking more at how Scientology works, and there'll be less focus on your personal experiences. But I know that there is so much insight from what you've already told me that you're going to give us about Scientology itself. So would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Thank you, Casey. So I am Kara, and I've been in the cult for quite some time because I was born in it. So I was never recruited. I didn't go through that process. And this is basically the first audio interview I'm doing on the cult subject. So if I'm a bit nervous, then I'm sorry. And I would like to first and foremost thank you for giving me a soapbox from which I can speak. And I love being here.
Yes, I'm really excited to finally get to chat in person because you've been sending me some emails throughout the week with things around Scientology that I wasn't aware of even after the interviews and research that I've done. So I'm not sure how long we're going to talk for today. It could be for a good long while because I want to make sure that I get as much of that information from you for the listeners as possible today. So I'm really excited to be able to have this opportunity. And you mentioned that you were born into Scientology. Obviously, we're not going to be too specific about yourself, but did your parents... did they meet as part of Scientology themselves, or was one of them part of the church and kind of brought the other one in, and then they had you? How did that work?
Okay, it was actually a bit. I'm actually a third generation somewhat. So basically, it was my grandfather and my mother who were in. My dad did like 1, 2 courses, but
Okay.
he wasn't interested, which was one of the reasons why they split. That's another issue. And what can I say? Oh, maybe I will refer to Kat's interview because that's a great thing. When Kat was speaking about the fact that the male head of the household, the paterfamilias, died, and her mom basically left her and spent all the money on the cult and still working for the cult. My reaction was, oh, I have a sister I never knew about, and she's talking about my mom. Oh no, wait,
Is that similar?
we were
Yeah.
never Mormons, but yeah, it's awfully similar.
Okay. So your mum's still actively working for the church.
Exactly.
Okay. And
Unfortunately.
yes, yeah, I from what Kat was saying, I mean, it's put a real strain on their relationship, um and financially her mum seems to be struggling to kind of make ends meet now, which is obviously not what Kat's dad would have wanted. So I found it particularly difficult to listen to parts of Kat's interview, but also those things need to be explored and need to be said because they are happening, and that exploitation is happening to families and people all over the place that are involved in all types of sects and religions and movements. But when you were growing up in the church, what did recruitment look like for you? Was it different to Kat's experience of
Yes.
her mum's friend bringing them in and then them going kind of to the celebrity center and that sort of thing?
It was very different in this respect because basically Kat's mom was recruited when Kat was already alive, and my grandfather and my mother were already inside it when I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a very slow process of getting there, and it was mostly through lessons with my grandfather because I was homeschooled. He was a larger than life figure for not just for me, for a lot of people. I'm just gonna leave it at that. He was very active in a lot of groups,
Okay.
not necessarily just the religious and cult, with other real world groups that did real things. And maybe I will refer to Fred's interview here. My level of education was different than his
Mm-hmm.
because the way he said it, he felt he had it much better than all the other kids. I felt my math skills and something like physics skills were lower than kids my age when I finally started to interact with those who didn't were not from the group.
Mm-hmm.
However, my geography, my history, my biology was way above, way
Right.
above. So that part is true, but I think that's thanks to this individual person that taught me not to the structure, to the so-called study tech. Because later when he died, I was inside and I went through the actual study tech with the people, not with this loosey-goosey thing that my grandfather did. One thing that's very important to note is that children are treated as adults,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be very good and it can be very bad. It can be very good because, well, from a very early age, in my case, I was given books somewhat above my level.
Mm-hmm.
There was a period I was super interested in things like ancient Mayan civilization, the Roman civilization, and I read basically university textbooks about those issues. And I was allowed to do that. And my grandfather taught me to read at something like 3.5 or 4 years of age. And his approach was, and this was the good part of the cult structure. He was like, okay, first read the book, try to understand it, then we can talk.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave me a lot of freedom to do things in a way that other kids wouldn't even be able to do before they were like.
Yeah. But the flip side of that, yeah.
There's a bad part. Don't think Fred mentioned it, and I really want to mention it. The bad part is at the end you often end up having a huge vocabulary. Okay, I will say it like this: you can say a lot of great flowery things, but you have nothing to say, nobody to say it to, and nobody will listen.
Lots to say about nothing at all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in my case, I could have very good conversations about marine life or the Mayans, but that wasn't entirely good later on in my life when I started, living the big world. I'm going to call it the big world, not the bubble world of the cult. And also I want to say that the study tech, when used by people who have not so good intentions or who are simply annoyed at everything, and let me tell you something, the people who take care of the children are usually the worst people inside the cult. That's the people the cult doesn't want anywhere else. So if you have a squeaky wheel, if you have a board that sticks above and everyone hits their foot on it, that board is going to be sent to be an ant.
Right.
And a lot of those people are angry because they feel like they're the lowest point in their life.
And they're sent to look after the children.
Yes. So the study tech in their version can look something like this. Okay, read the text. And then you would find something that you don't agree with the text because of its content, because it's not clear, because, well, Hubbard is often nebulous and not clear. And they will take it like, okay, you didn't understand some word. Please word clear all the 500 words in this text. So you open the dictionary, you word clear it, and then they ask you, and you have to recite from memory. Okay, Karakorum, you word cleared all the words. Fine. Give me the 19 definitions of D. Give me the 20 definitions of A. This is a board or a wall. And then you go through this. You make some mistake because you didn't memorize it fair enough. You go back, you word clear it again.
Oh my goodness.
And it goes like that.
That sounds absolutely exhausting.
That was probably the one moment where I felt like close to going insane. One of the worst
I
parts.
mean, I understand why Hubbard wanted that to be a part of Scientology, but I don't understand what people have to gain from it as a transferable skill sort of outside of the movement. Do you think that's Scientology's version of like the Hare Krishnas with their chanting?
No, I would say there is one very precise reason why Hubbard did this.
Right.
And this is basically, if you get a Hubbard text and you don't agree with something there, it's not Hubbard's fault, it's your fault because you didn't understand somewhere.
Okay,
and the weird part is, he got this misunderstood words technology from a guy called Korzybski, who was an actual educator. He was actually, I think he was late 19th century, early 20th century guy who worked with children and students and taught them how to study.
Okay.
And the idea that kids shouldn't have misunderstood words, that if they're reading a text and they don't understand something, they just ignore it and go on and don't understand the text at the end, that's bad. Yeah, I agree. That's a good concept, that people should be able to understand the texts, and you should make sure they understood the words in them before you grade them. The problem is, Hubbard, as most things in the cult, he took a good concept and then ranked it up to 11 when it's no longer used.
And you mentioned that the recruitment for you into Scientology looked different from Fred and Kat because you were born into the movement. Was that typical of somebody living in your area at that time, or was that quite different for you in terms of other typical children in your neighborhood?
Okay, when I was still living with my grandfather and he was alive, we were a usual middle-class suburban family. So I had friends outside the cult.
Okay.
And I had a lot of friends, and like almost none of them were in the cult because there aren't that many people in the cult. So I had Jewish friends, I had Catholic friends, I have atheist friends, and basically, there was also the issue that because my grandfather had a very specific job, which meant he was at home like the vast majority of the time. So a lot of those kids, and my grandfather was very trusted in the community. So a lot of those kids who came home early and both of their parents were working, they would often come to my house because people knew that there are adults there, that nothing bad will happen.
Right.
So I had a lot of friends from all sorts of backgrounds. Most of them went to school, not a minority was homeschooled. And we basically treated it as one more culture, one more religion. Like I said, there were lots of people. It wasn't weird for us. It became weird when I started living in the actual facility. But at that point in time, when you're a public Scientologist, you can go on probably 90% of your life without something very weird happening, and without being, basically a soldier for a totalitarian organization. Which I later was.
Which is definitely something I think we're going to get into before we finish today. But something I wanted to touch upon that's not on the list I sent over. Your primary you've got your mum as your primary caregiver, but it sounds like the male role model in your life is your grandfather.
Yeah.
So when he passes away, is there a period of mourning for you, or are you told that you don't need to worry about mourning because he's just kind of shed his body and his Satan is kind of gone off to continue the work that it was doing when it was in the body of your grandfather?
Kind of both. So there is the belief reincarnation is a thing. And it's a very big thing. And also it's important. My grandfather he flirted with Buddhism before.
Okay, yeah. So similar kind of beliefs around reincarnation.
He told us a lot about Buddhism. So he studied Mahayana Buddhism, Then he decided that's not for him.
Okay.
He studied the Southern Buddhism, Theravada, specifically the Pali Canon, which is from modern Bangladesh and northeastern India. And then he decided it's too frou-frou. There's too much woo there. There's like magical beings and demons and hungry ghosts. And he felt that it's too folksy. It's like contaminated with this weird belief.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, he was one of the people who had recalled previous life experiences before he joined Scientology.
Okay.
So that messed with him. And he always taught us that. And he told us openly about those things which he remembered, and he could remember like specific moments in time with very down to real small details. Like it was raining, there was this sort of clock on the wall, we had coal which we used to, but he could describe like an interior of a room very, very precisely, and it was very convincing. So we had no reason to doubt that part of the cult.
Yeah.
However, what happened when he died? He died suddenly. It was a sudden death. It wasn't a long illness. He died basically. I found out that something is wrong with him the same day he died. So
okay.
It was literally that point in time. And within a very short period of time, my mom joined the structure. She got a position. She got a post. That's how it's called. She was posted very far away. So literally within a very short period of time, me and my sister were living alone with those cult functionaries. And my mom was somewhere very far away. And what can I say? Well, we used to like have a phone call with her like once a month and then meet her maybe once a year. So the whole life changed. Everything changed.
So lots of upheaval around the time of your grandfather passing away.
Yeah, like I said, this was a middle class family, and then we moved to a certain facility, me and my sister, which was, well, it's called LA's tallest dumpster for a good reason. Broken tiles, moldy carpets, old furniture, fungus on some furniture. It's several stories of just trash, and there's a lot of people living there, and you're alone. You don't have your friends because they're somewhere else. You don't have your family. It wasn't a nice situation. It was like that. It was black and white. It's just moving from one part of my life to something totally different.
And your mum, did she sign over guardianship of you and your sister to be able to leave you in this place while she went elsewhere to do other things?
At some point she did, but I don't know the legal stuff.
Right, yeah. And do you think that she made this drastic change because of the grief of losing her father?
No, partially, but I think the real reason was that my grandfather, like I said, he had a very strong personality. He was a person who could literally crush other people with his will.
Right.
And people admired him, but they were also afraid of him. And I remember like cult registrars, the sales guys who would come to our house, and he would pretty much talk them down, show them the door, and they would just leave very meekly.
Okay, yeah.
So he was very much, he wasn't a cult, but he was in control, and he always made sure that he's in the driver's seat.
Right.
And people didn't really want to mess with him because I think they decided that he's more worth being kind of 1 foot in with some leeway than making him an enemy and then create the giant thing.
Well, at least it sounds like he protected you.
He did.
Do you ever think back, fondly about times that you had with your grandfather?
Oh, very much. He was also a good person to have when you were a kid. Because he liked science fiction a lot. He had tons of science fiction books. He liked weird electronic music, which nobody in the United States heard about. He listened to Tomita, to Kitaro, to Jean-Michel Jarre, all those people. Fun fact about cult technology, there's something called exchange, meaning basically nobody should be a freeloader. You should be on a level. When you get something, you should give something back. So we wanted to have a NES, a Nintendo Entertainment System, a gaming system.
Yep.
And he made us do all sorts of things for something like 8 or 9 months, so we could get it. So we made like small swords, etc., help with all sorts of weird things. And then when he finally bought it, he says like, okay, there's like a few games I really like. I'm gonna play them with you. I enjoy them, so I'm gonna give you half of the money back because now I participate in this thing that I bought.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's his way of saying like, I was always going to pay for half of it, but I wanted you to work for it yourself.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to tell you outright that I'm paying for half of it. Oh, that's such a grandparents are the best. It's so hard to lose a grandparent. I know when my grandmother passed away, it felt like losing like part of my body. She really was my best friend, and it really is hard to lose a grandparent. I can imagine it's just I can't even imagine what it's like to lose a parent, but to lose a grandparent is it's not easy. So I'm glad you get to look back fondly on the time that you had with him.
Yeah, for me he was a parental figure. He wasn't just some.
Yeah.
He was the pater familias. Let's use the Roman term. So getting back, why my mother? He was always in the driver's seat. So when he left, the driver's seat was empty and the car veered off the road.
Right. Yeah.
She needed someone to take control of her life, and unfortunately, that was the cult.
Right.
And the other problem with her, well, I don't want to talk much about her because we're really not on good terms. We're on very bad terms.
Right. Okay.
The thing with her, the saying that a person will not pay his taxes, but he'll get himself killed to get a ribbon and a medal.
Right.
That's her. That's her.
Okay.
She's gonna do everything for this, for a certain status and certain attention and a certain formal recognition of her as a big being. So, and the cult bought her with that, and that's her ruin, and that's what keeps her in.
And is she, I mean, when she went and got posted, is she part of the Sea Org here, or is there a time where you or your sister become part of the Sea Org?
That's one of the top secret questions I will not answer. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's absolutely fine. And are there other positions that you held that maybe you can mention?
Yeah, I can say a lot. First, I lived in I can say the name. I already posted on the forum. It's the AB, the Anthony Building. It's between Fountain and Sunset. It's in downtown LA. Anyway, and later on, because like I said, there's, as a second generation kid, if you want to leave the cult, you have nowhere to go. That's the problem. You have no skills. You don't have any work history, because even like later on, I worked in some positions which would be really good if I could put them on my CV. But I couldn't, because the church would say, "Oh no, this guy, we barely know him. What did he do? He washed a few floors. That's it." Like nobody would say that I worked in the archives for a long time, and I have real archival knowledge. So one reason why I joined staff, so I was also posted, was because I had nowhere to go. And I also saw other people who kind of were kicked out of the church, or who got posted somewhere. Let's put it this way: they were posted in the sticks in some small failing org, or they were sent. And I know that some of them really didn't do well, and some of them, well, the cult just told us they're not doing well. But later on, when I left the cult, I saw there's a guy, he's called Nate Rich. He was, as a teenager, he was kicked out of this similar facility to what I was. And he became a drug addict. He was living on the streets. He was literally homeless for like several years before he got his life back. He's very successful now. He's a programmist, but he writes computer programs. But I know that could happen, and I didn't want that to happen. And also my mom pressured us to go join staff. So I joined staff. My first job on staff was being a registrar. I was a sales guy for something like 4 days, 1 week, something like that. The problem was being a registrar can be very profitable. There's something called the FSM, which is a guy who is not York. He's a salesman in the big world. He sells Scientology stuff, and he gets 15% of all his sales.
Okay.
Some of those people got really, really rich.
Yep, yep.
And being a registrar is kind of a high mark. If you get that position early on in your life, means people trust you, people think you're intelligent. So I was like, yay. And on my first day, I realized, no, I'm being set up for failure because I was given a phone. I was going to call people from a list and just make them buy things.
Yeah.
And that list was people who didn't do anything for 20 years, 10 years. I didn't know what courses these guys already took. I just had a list.
Right.
I didn't know who they are. So some of the calls were super awkward. Like, hello, I'm calling from, and I heard this person, what? After 30 years, you must be some fucking loser. I phoned some people on their cell phone, and turns out they were on the other side of the world. And I'm like calling, and they're like, what? It's 2 p.m. It's 2 a.m. What the hell?
Wow. Okay.
Some people said things like, well, and I said, okay, do you want this course? And he said, like, yeah, I already did it once, and then they changed some things, and I had to do it again.
Right.
Okay, so you already did it. Did you do this course? Yes. Did you do this course? And it's like, yeah, I did all those courses. Dude, you don't even know what courses I completed. Come on, I'm, an OTT. So I'm saying, oh, you're OTT. Okay, maybe your wife could take this course. And he's like, my wife died 3 years ago. You don't even know that.
No. Oh my goodness, that's so tough.
And 4 days of this, as you imagine, very little sales. So I got kicked out. And now I know all the low-hanging fruits were left for the real veggies, quote unquote. And I just got the short end of the stick. So I was kicked to the lowest possible position. So I was the body router. You know what's that?
No.
Guy stands in front of the org and he invites people in.
No.
So I did that.
That's like the equivalent of somebody that was wearing a mascot uniform outside a pizza parlor.
Maybe not that bad.
Spinning a sign on his head.
Yeah, but you have to convince them to do it. So there is some effort involved.
That's true.
But Hubbard, in one of the lectures, Hubbard literally says, if you have a guy who's stupid or a girl who's stupid, but she looks kind of good and they're kind of nice, have them be the body router. That's the place for them.
And he has written something like that, and you've read that.
He spoke it in a lecture, I think.
And then you're in that position, and you're aware of the leader's thoughts around the position that you now hold.
Also, it's important. I already also mentioned on the forum. I will not use real names of people. I will just give them nicknames. So the person who was in charge of me was a person, I will call her Eris. She was a relatively attractive woman in her early 30s. The first time I saw her, she made a very good impression on me. She was energetic and enthusiastic and all the things that you should be in the cult. I know the tone scale, as they call it.
Right, yeah.
What it turned out, she was a person who was she was a magical thinker to the 10th degree. So basically, if something goes wrong, it means you didn't approach it with a positive mindset. We can sell anything. We can sell ice to the Eskimos if we adopt a positive mindset. Something is wrong with you, etc. And those were the late 90s in LA. People were talking about, Columbine and the Matrix. Nobody wanted to go into Scientology. Come on.
Yeah.
So we had very low success rates. And she was very angry. And we got shouted at a lot. She didn't curse at anyone, but she would say nasty things, You're a child, you know nothing, nobody trained you. Who gave me those worthless guys to work with? The one thing I then noticed was an important part in later how I got out. I noticed one day I was out and another body router working with me was a very, very attractive woman. And guys were just flocking to her, but none of them wanted to go in the org. They just wanted to flirt with her.
Right.
So I went to the other side of the street and I started thinking for myself, basically. Okay, I'm off the script as I am, so I'm going to just do my own thing. And I figured out a demographic that I can sell to. Those were old hippies.
Yeah.
Another was something I would later call upstart surfers, meaning people who look like surfers, but they're neat. They look like they have a job. They look like they're not smoking pot all day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I found those few weird groups. I started, also like edgy girls with tattoos and with carrying an instrument. If I saw a girl with an instrument, I already knew she's gonna go into the org.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I got some good results. And suddenly my results were rising. And at one point, I was the most successful person in a big area. Let's call it that.
Whee! Very good.
So the ED, the guy in charge of the org, even told me, okay, Kara, you're going to make basically a lecture. You're going to teach your method to all those other guys because we need to get our stats up. We need to get our stats up. Our production has to be high. And this was very dangerous of her because basically you shouldn't do things in a different way than Hubbard said. But she was basically saying, yeah, Karakorum invented something else.
Yeah,
let's try that.
Of course.
The worst part is nobody could replicate my method because Scientology has a philosophy, one size fits all. We know the best solution. Once we found the solution, it will work for everyone the same.
Right.
Of course, it does not. So my approach was good because I tailored it to myself. And none of them could replicate it.
No.
So I got in trouble. Eris got in trouble. Then I got sick.
Oh, God.
I was like ill for something like a week. And the stats of the org dropped. The whole org dropped.
Wow, because you were like out of action?
Because I was out of action.
Wow.
So when I was back, Eris pulled me into a room and she really let me have it verbally. It was like a beta verbally. And then it dawned on me that, hey, Eris, you shouldn't talk to me like that because my stats are your stats. Without me, you're nothing.
Yeah.
Without my recruits, you don't have anything. So if you're gonna attack me, you're attacking yourself. If you're damaging me, you're damaging yourself. Now you have to be my best buddy. And she was really shocked, but that was one thing I learned, that sometimes when you have good stats and you're in a good status with the org, you're producing, you're being a productive member of the cult, you can do anything. You can do things that you're not allowed to do suddenly. You have freedom. And Hubbard designed it this way. The people who produce get the freedom. He even wrote it somewhere that someone whose stats are going up, he can do no wrong. He can break rules and you have to look away. The other thing that really turned me into a more vicious cult member was the fact that I was standing and recruiting, and there was a guy who came up from behind me and hit me on the head really, strongly. I was just a small teenager. And
oh my goodness.
So I fell to the, sidewalk, lost consciousness for like a second. Guys from the org ran out, and they were like, oh, do you want to stop? Maybe, yeah, people started to panic. And I was like, no, this guy wanted me off, so I will stay here. And I'm going to do my job twice as well.
And it's just somebody that didn't want you like proselytizing on the street.
Yeah. Maybe he had a very good reason to hate the cult. I don't know. But that pulled me in. That was the point where like my well-being and the cult's well-being are the same.
Right. And do you think that you got some of that sort of formidable personality from your grandfather?
I don't know, maybe. I like to think so, but I'm a megalomaniac, so
You gave me some interesting points in your emails to me. Lots of expressions and language that's used and abbreviations used within Scientology that myself and maybe some of the listeners hadn't come across before. So I'm just going to reel them off. And if you could explain to us what they mean, they may have already been mentioned in previous episodes, but I just wanted to go through some of them. So there's off source.
Sure. Source, Hubbard is source. So he's the source of the knowledge. And the knowledge is basically what gives you deliverance from evil. Let's put it this way. That's the salvation. So his source is not a god. If someone tells you Hubbard is God, know that they don't know what he's talking about. if I have to compare him to other religions, he's like Muhammad in Islam. He's the prophet, but he's not God.
Right.
And he made it super clear, and nobody in my presence made that claim that he's God.
So any information that comes from anybody other than Hubbard, that information is off source.
No. Off source is something you do when there's Hubbard sets, you do it in one specific way and you do it in a different way. Then you're off source.
Right. So when you were getting all of these sales, you were off source.
Yeah, and I was also a bit of a squirrel. Squirrel is someone who tries to do Scientology in a different way. And technically Hubbard says, then you will not achieve results. Then you're going to be like a hamster on a wheel. But he said squirrel, and that's where the term comes from.
Right. Okay. And what about MEST work?
Okay, MEST. MEST is matter, energy, space, and time. And this basically means the physical universe. That means matter. That's like the Greek word hyle from Greek philosophy. That just inanimate matter. And MEST work is basically doing menial labor. So when someone says, oh, my stats were down and I was given a lower condition and I now have to do MEST work, that means, well, I didn't, for example, sell as many books as I should have. So now I'm treated as someone who needs to make amends. And now I'm scrubbing the floors for like 1 week. So to make up for it. So MEST work is working menially. It's physical labor.
Okay, and who determines whether you're supposed to receive this MEST work? Because it seems like anybody could just be told that they haven't done something adequately enough, so now they have to go and do manual labor.
Okay, it's a corporation, so you have stats, which means your. Okay, let me give a simple example. A registrar is going to be the best. The salesman, he's going to be the best example, the simplest one. You have a stat called, for example, courses, number of courses sold. You have another stat, and it's a graph. It's a number each week. And another stat would be something like money earned. Another stat could be new people gotten into, contacted. You can have only one stat. For example, if you're a gardener, you can only have a stat called number of bushes watered this week.
Okay,
that could be your only stat. And there are some positions where you have like a dozen stats. Basically, each week they measure. If you're doing better than the previous week, you are up stat. That means you're doing good. You're the good guy.
Right.
If your stats are down, you are down stat. That means you're probably going in trouble. You can be sent to an ethics officer, someone like me, and that person will then possibly interrogate you about the causes, because like many cults, whenever something goes wrong, or you don't sell enough stuff, or your other stats are down, it probably means, according to Hubbard, that you have some moral problem.
That sounds similar to. I had an interview last week with a lady from multi-level marketing advocate, and she was talking about how the thing with being in an MLM is that the bonuses that you receive are conditional. So you always and to retain the position that you are given in the MLM, that's also conditional. So even though it works in the way like, oh, I've received a promotion in inverted commas, and this is actually my job role that I get paid to do full time, and this is my post. Say you move up from line worker to general manager, then you're in that job in typical everyday life, you're supposed to fill the job role requirements the same week in, week out. You're not expected to build on. But in the MLM, you're supposed to always do better than you did the week before. And if you don't, you lose that you lose that sort of level that you've worked up to, and you go back down a level. And then when you're doing good again, you move up. So that sounds quite similar in that sense. But what you're saying here is that you'll receive MEST work if you cannot retain or improve on the figures that you got. That's
one of the possible punishments. There's different sorts of punishments for different things. Not stats are one thing you can get punished for, like for sins, basically, for immoral behavior. You can get punished for actual crimes. Yes, ethics does that too. But I'm just going to ask about this person. Was this person from Landmark? Is this the Landmark Forum?
No, it was a clothing company called LuLaRoe.
Okay, never heard of it. Yeah, because Landmark is watered down Scientology. The guy who started Landmark before the company, which was based on Scientology, he got sued and then he created Landmark, basically.
Really? That's interesting. I'm going to make a note of that to look into that.
Anyway, when it comes to ethics, that's for me, that was the greatest problem, and that was a big mindfuck for me. The greatest problem is that ethics is deliberately mixed up and conflated with efficiency. There's no such thing as an inefficient moral person, and there's no such thing as an inefficient as a person who's, when you're immoral, you're inefficient. When you're moral, you must be efficient. If you're not being efficient, that means you're immoral.
Right.
And it could be immoral things that you did in past lives. So even if you can prove you did nothing bad this week and this month and this year and during this lifetime, there's some reason.
That is, oh my goodness, that's awful.
That's awful, and it's good because you can always blame it on stuff you did in another galaxy 2000 years ago.
Yeah, but if you're genuinely, truly innocent and you've done nothing wrong, and then you get told, but we're talking about something that you did in a previous life.
Mm-hmm.
How are you supposed to avoid punishment in that sense?
You don't avoid punishment. You just do the amends. So
what if it's something you don't like, something that you've never even heard of, something you've been accused of that you've never even...
Oh, that's super common. I can give you examples of lists
scary.
I run people on that had questions like, quote, okay, did you ever smuggle diamonds? Did you ever peddle drugs? And you ask them to an 11-year-old kid, for example. Did you ever have, anal sex with a member of a different race?
Oh my goodness.
That's a possible, and maybe not those. There's two different questions like that. One is the race one, the other is the anal sex. And did you ever do any overt, meaning evil acts towards time itself?
Right.
Did you do any overts against matter? Did you do any overts against space? And you can ask them to, an lady 80 years old. You can ask them to a kid who's 9 years old. And in this life, he doesn't have the power to sin against time itself, right?
Right.
But maybe he could before.
But then that just means that if you want to inflict punishment on somebody for something, you could just tell them that they did something in a previous life. Like this e-meter is telling us that you have smuggled diamonds, you 11-year-old child.
Not exactly. It's both better and worse because you don't tell them what they did. They tell you what they did. They come up with the past life reason. You just see, the meter reads. Okay, the meter read, meaning there was that needle moved when I was thinking about diamonds. Okay. Do you remember something about diamonds? And you better do.
That feels like coerced confession. Like
it is.
It makes confession. Me feel so uncomfortable thinking about all these people that go into these situations.
Are taped.
Are they? Oh my goodness.
And when I was I'm going to move to that later, but I was an ethics officer, the beat cop at one point. But later on, I joined the Sea Org, and I was at one point, I was in. Okay, basically, if the ethics officer at some random org, for example, in Albuquerque, there's one guy who's the ethics, or a girl. Most are actually women.
Okay.
Most ethics officers are women. So she's like a beat cop. But then, if you move into the Sea Org, there's something called Continental Management, which has its own department. It's like a corporation. Right. And there's other corporations linked to it, but there's something called Continental Management. Above it, there's something called International Management. That's just one base in the United States. And on this upper level, upper management level. Don't confuse spiritual levels with management levels. They're two
Right.
different things, and usually
Yep.
when you're high in one, you're low in the other. It's very rarely that
Okay.
you're
Okay.
I'll get to that later. So I was in something which I would call, if it was a corporation, I would call ethics escalations. And if it would be like real world special services, I would say it was the FBI. It's the upper version of a cop. So there you have actually access to all the archives and all the confessions other people made, their tapes or transcripts or even video recordings in some fashion. You have it all in one computer system. You open the file, Joe Schmo, you have all his file, all his real world information, like when did he marry? Why did he marry?
Right.
Where does he live? How much does he earn? Everything. And on top of that, you have recordings or transcripts of those confessions. And those confessions are not only old world stuff like previous life, they can be this life stuff.
And are you informed that you're being recorded at the time you make these confessions?
Yeah, but it's sneaky because it's said that, well, it's recorded, but it's recorded usually for the purpose of evaluation of the guy who's doing the auditing.
For training, right, okay, yeah.
And it's actually, that part is also true because every auditor has something that's above him, someone who deals with quality. So the guy who checks it and says, yeah, you did the auditing correctly or incorrectly, according to Hubbard, not according to Hubbard. And they use those recordings. However, there's also, it's usually said, but it's like said once and then you forget about it and you find it out 20 years later. It could be used for other purposes. Mm-hmm. And one of the purposes is ethics. And they will justify it in the system. Well, okay, Hubbard has this one quote, which he says, well, every person, when we have a situation like we're standing and we're seeing something evil being done, like a guy putting pins in another person, he says the evil people are going to sit down and do nothing.
Yeah.
And the good moral people are going to stand up and do something.
Right.
They're going to stop the guy after one pin. And this is the reason why he introduced knowledge reports, which is basically you're writing a report against someone. It's communist style, you know, dear KGB. This is what this is.
Yeah.
And this is also why ethics officers are allowed to look into those supposedly confidential files.
Okay.
And there's several types of reports. One is the knowledge report. The most two common are the knowledge report, and the other is the so-called things that shouldn't be.
Okay.
So a knowledge report is something like, for example, I would write a knowledge report on you, and I would say, well, I saw Casey stealing from John yesterday. She stole his sandwich and ate it. And I would write it to my officer. I would send a copy to ethics. Later, a copy would be sent to the central files, and I would have to send a copy to you.
Right, so all that stuff goes on file as well.
You would receive a copy saying, yeah, Karakorum just reported you for stealing a sandwich. Right. And you would have my document. And the things that shouldn't be is a more sneaky document because it was originally designed by Hubbard as a sort of quick response, lower severity document. It was just something you would send like, oh, the wall is dirty somewhere. Or, yeah, I was busy with something else, but I saw on the ship that the anchor is not properly lowered. Something like that.
Right.
So it's things that that's how it should be, quote unquote. However, then you don't have to send the copy to the person you're reporting if you file things that shouldn't be. So what happens later on? Well, people write things that shouldn't be on everyone. They're like, okay, I saw Marty. He was 2D flowing Jenny at this event. He was leering sexually at her. And I write this. Nobody knows I reported Tom and Jenny, but they get called in and they don't know why. They just suppose someone probably reported it. This happens all the time. This FBI is one of the guys who look through all the possible KRs, and they should. That were sent to the central files. And there's also a website that people can go there and then can file a KR or things that shouldn't be. That's also sent.
Okay.
And that's a lot of work. That was my main task, just going through those things. And each of them would be created, we would call them a case. Case means several different things in Scientology, but when I'm going to say case right now, I mean this investigation. So I would get a case. and I would have to close it, and I would daily get something like 70 often, and I would have to close them. And my stat was actually, it was a reverse stat. It was a stat called aged cases. So the more old cases that I didn't close in time I had, the worse I was. And my whole team was like that. We were super understaffed. We were flooded by work.
Yeah, especially if everybody's constantly making these knowledge reports.
Everyone is constantly. We had one complaint. I wrote about it on the forum, so I can mention it openly. Again, a guy wrote a KR on another guy saying this. Okay, I'm going to use names. So Bill wrote a KR on John, and he says, well, John is having a problem. Each evening, I hear John, and he's complaining that he has to send so many KRs today. And he's loudly complaining, and this is horrible. Sea Org members shouldn't loudly complain. And our joke, I think your video froze. No, wait, it didn't.
No, I'm just making notes as we go.
So the joke that we made in the team, we shouldn't joke about anything. That's one more rule, but we constantly broke it. It was joking galore there. So the joke you made, someone complained about KRs being filed. We should totally uphold this complaint, because then we'll send less KRs if we start doing that. So this is one of the things that we do. And one of the reasons why I became an ethics officer was because I thought this was, I was basically doing nothing good when I was a recruiter, and I didn't feel it was beneficial for me. I was not going anywhere. So there was an ethics officer who came, a new ethics officer, who was very intelligent, and she got me interested in the whole business. And later on, when I joined the Sea Org, because I had this ethics past, and I had some other skills which I will not mention. So first I was sent to the archives. Then after I worked in the archives, someone decided and I will brag here, someone decided that I'm really, really good. So I was sent to this, to a position which is called MAA, Master of Arms. So I was the ethics officer for the Sea Org in the Sea Org.
Right.
And then I was promoted up, and I was in continental management and several different posts, which I will not mention because they're going to be really helpful to locating me. However, at one point, I was moved to this FBI. And the reason why I pretty much got recruited into the Sea Org in the first place, I'm this person, I like to play with Legos as a kid, and I'm this person who likes to take a big machine apart, figure out how it works, and put it together so it works better. That's my personality.
Okay, yeah.
And they grabbed onto that.
Right.
They were like, okay, if you want to make things happen, if you want to make changes, if you want to improve this whole thing, which we all know doesn't work that well, that was the underlying statement nobody said out loud, but we all knew that. Go to the Sea Org. That's the place for you. And they have a lot of different pitches for different people.
Okay.
The most common one is save the world. They didn't use that on me. They used make things better, be the guy, be at cause.
Yeah.
It's a big thing in Scientology. Be at cause. That means cause other things to happen and not let other things cause you to do things. Basically, be the guy in charge. Which doesn't really work like that in Sea Org, but that's another story. But very few people got recruited into the Sea Org by being told the truth.
Right.
Anyway, the thing that I want to go is that this FBI does actual investigations also. So into things like workplace accidents.
Okay.
If a work, and they happen. So one of the reasons which I think people are constantly sleep deprived or they sleep too little doesn't mean they're forbidden explicitly to go to sleep. There's just so much work that they have to work they have just 4 or 7 or 3 hours left to sleep. That's one reason. The other reason, Hubbard, when he was drafting instructions for the Sea Org, this is a document nobody speaks about, and this is one of the most pernicious documents in the cults. So I'll mention it here. He says, a Sea Org member is expected to be able to make things go right all the time. Anything. Trained or not, hatted or not. Hatted means basically trained formally in the post.
Right, yeah.
So even if you're basically, we have construction. You never use the jackhammer. Okay, here is the jackhammer. You must have done it in a previous life a million times. So please do the work.
Right. Okay.
Oh, you were never an electrician. Okay, the external electrician that we hired is off for today, but we have to finish this by the end of the shift. So there you go, plug the wires.
Okay. Yeah.
People get harmed a lot.
Yeah.
I saw some of them myself. There was a guy who blew his arm with a grease gun. I was there.
Oh my goodness.
Nothing like making an investigation where you're the witness. That's always quote unquote fun.
Yeah.
And some other things like that. So this was one thing that we did. The other thing, we did actual investigations, which I know for a fact this wasn't done like that in the 80s. This changed. In the 80s, it was OSA that was doing that. Other people who were there at the time confirmed it to me later on, now that they're all ex-members.
Right. Okay.
Financial shenanigans, people who stole from the org, people who reported less money than actually went to them, people who, because this is common, that people buy courses in bulk. They buy 70 courses or millions of hours. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit, but they buy really bulk things in bulk, which they don't do all at the same day.
Okay.
Bought, of course. So what happens? I come to you, I pay $100,000 today for courses that I will do 2 years into the future.
Yeah.
So what for example, the sneaky guy can do, he can take the money, he can move only the money for the nearest course to the org, keep the rest of the money himself, and, for example, pay off his debts, and then only use this money in the meantime while it's not with the guy, it's not with the org.
Okay.
He moves the money around. He makes investments. There's people who lost those investments. There's people who...
Yeah, that's dodgy.
You had 8 members who paid a lot of money to this guy. Church didn't get it. Guy made an investment. He lost all the money.
Oof.
The church is pissed at him. The guys are pissed at him. And I'm the justice guy. Guess what I'm going to do to him?
Oh,
He's going to be a very sorry person. And so financial investigations. Before that, there was something called FinPo, Financial Police, which was pretty much non-active during my day. It was us, and there was OSA. And that's one more thing I want to mention it now. This is something not just cults, but almost all totalitarian regimes do. They create many different enforcement agencies, independent from one another, and those agencies have overlapping areas of responsibility, which means they often step on one another's toes and double do the work that was already done by the other guy. I read, already after leaving the cult, I read about Hitler's Germany in the 30s. And there was Gestapo, the party police. There was Sicherheitsdienst. There was the things for domestic terrorism and serious crime, but it was part of the police. There was the SS. There was the Kripo, the criminal police. There was, I forget the name, but there was basically morality police. They were all independent agencies.
Right.
And they overlapped. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, that's exactly what we were doing.
But just different names.
And I hated that when I was inside the cult because it caused us extra work. And we were totally flooded with work. It was the main problem. We kept working and working and working, and we never had enough sleep. So when you spent, we slept for 5 hours this night because you were working on some case and it took you 12 hours to complete.
Oof.
And then you find out OSA already closed this case on their own end and they didn't notify you, or worse. I'm not going to give a specific example, but imagine I'm running a very long investigation. There's one person who did something very wrong, and I know there were other people who knew. And if you know about something and don't report it, you're as guilty as the guy who committed it.
Yeah.
You're going to get the same punishment.
Right.
So I'm okay, there's half a dozen people there who must have known, maybe more. I have to find out who.
Okay.
So we're running an investigation. Maybe I'm sending a figurant, fake actor, basically a person who joins this org, pretends he's someone else, but he's an informer.
Oh gosh, okay.
Because if it's a serious case, imagine it's a serious case.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 months working on it. and there's other people from my team working on it. We have now like 6 people who touched this case at some point. We all contributed countless hours to it.
Yeah.
And then we're thinking, okay, 2 more weeks, we will know everything. We're going to bag the whole bunch. We're going to bag like 12 people and sentence them. And then OSA waltzes in. They just capture the main guy, which we knew he was at fault for like 2 months. They try him. They do not interrogate him correctly. All those other people, run away, destroy their documents, destroy the evidence.
Oh, gosh.
And they go scot-free.
Yeah.
And then OSA comes to us. This guy was guilty. Why didn't you move against him?
Oh, right. And then it's you in the wrong. Yeah.
Stupid bastards. Yeah. And sometimes it would happen in the reverse, that we had some documents which OSA needed and we didn't give it to them because we weren't aware. Or sometimes we just didn't give it to them because we felt they're asshats. They won't do the job correctly.
So apart from this, what were OSA also responsible for?
Mostly their main area of activity, their main stat, let's call them, is dismissed attackers.
Okay.
Who's an attacker? A critic, an ex-member who speaks out. Me. I'm an attacker right now. A journalist who investigates things.
So they sit there sort of researching on the internet and all other places, people that might be sort of blaspheming against the church.
Not just researching, they go after them in various ways. I said the stat is dismissed attacker, not identified attacker. Identified attacker, who cares? You have to dismiss them. So you have to make them stop criticizing or speaking out.
Right. So they're the people that
poison other people's dogs, for example.
They're the people that people are scared of when they say, "Oh, don't talk about Scientology because bad things will happen." This is the part of the church that they're speaking about. Okay.
And theoretically, they should be the external enforcement agency. So they go after people outside the cult, mostly. They also deal with it's called out PR, meaning things that could create a public relations disaster. So things like celebrities.
Right.
If a celebrity writes, this guy, he's from that 70s show who's now on trial for rape. I'm sure they handled his case.
Right.
My FBI guys wouldn't have this case. And when I was in, I was suspecting that because I was like, okay, we got all those sexual molestation of adults cases. That was one of my special areas where I specialize in. Out to D meaning sexual immorality. And it could be just immorality, like 2 guys in the Sea Org are sleeping with some other woman.
Okay.
There's no force, there's no quid pro quo, regular love affair. I could handle that, but I also handle things like quid pro quo. So EDs are often rich people. They're often people who have a lot of money. So I saw cases where they would offer nice boats to women in exchange for sex. I saw instances where sometimes there would be people coming from other countries who are poor, or people simply coming from poor communities, or simply people who are on staff, they don't have any money, and there's this rich ED, and he's saying, okay, I'm going to let you crash for free on my couch, but we'll have to do other things on that couch first. Or he's saying, I will hire you in my company. Some of those people have really big companies. Yeah. And you're going to be paid a lot of money for stupid things, but, there's exchange. This is the cult. Exchange. You have to give me something.
Okay.
I would investigate those cases.
Okay.
That was one of my areas of where I specialized in. And those cases, like I said, sometimes took a lot of time. There was a lot of pressure on them because, I mentioned various departments in Scientology. There's something called CMO, Commodore's Messenger Organization. It started on the ship with the original Sea Org when they were actually on the Apollo, on the ship called Apollo. They were sailing with Hubbard around the Mediterranean Ocean and parts of the Atlantic. And basically, Howard was sitting in his office on the ship, and he wanted things to be done all over the ship. He was the captain. So he organized a group. They were mostly preteen and teen girls, a few boys. They were children. And he told them, you're going to be my messengers. You're going to deliver my orders to other people. And the important part was, you're not just the messenger. You're not just some random guy carrying the message. No, when you go there, you're the embodiment of me. You're the embodiment of command intention.
Right, okay.
So those people were given a lot of power, because when they walked into the machine room and told them to turn off the engine, that was Hubbard speaking. That wasn't this kid. And you had to talk to this 12-year-old kid as if he's Hubbard. And this organization still functions. It's not always the same people. Now there's people who are not even alive when Hubbard died. So
yeah,
this organization is it's still the embodiment of command intention.
Mm-hmm.
So in this sense, those are very, very powerful. And after Miscavige took over the cult, Hubbard created a certain management structure that should function after his death, but the one Miscavige took it over not exactly as Hubbard intended. That's obvious.
Yeah.
But he cannot change things that Hubbard established, because Miscavige is not the power player. He's not the game maker. He's just the assistant player. He's still the junior guy. The cult guru is still the guru. So he couldn't change the structure in a way to allow himself to give direct orders. So he built a structure around the existing structure, and Scientology was 50 different structures that are in parallel. And the most probably important one for putting orders down is the CMO, because Miscavige started using the CMO the same way that Hubbard was using them on the ship. Now they're his command intention.
Right.
And the problem was, when there was a big case or a very stinky case or something horrible happening, what happened? The CMO was sent. And, I have my team, half a dozen people. We're all super busy. We have 1 million cases. We skipped our lunch. And then suddenly a CMO girl, because it's also one of those organizations where CMO is probably 95% female.
Right.
That's an important thing in the cult, that the leader is male, but the vast majority of people in those very high positions were female.
Right.
The few powerful males that were there, they were kicked out. Mike Rinder, he was the head of OSA for the longest time, for my whole life there.
Yeah.
He's now an ex-Scientology member. He's an outspoken critic. He spoke on many TV shows. The TV show with Leah Remini?
Yes, I saw that. It's A&E, isn't it? The A&E series.
He's the bald guy, the bald kind of Australian guy.
Yeah.
That's him.
I think he talked about being in the hole for 2 years or something.
Yes. So
right.
Miscavige got rid of all the powerful people, most of the powerful people in top management, and I think all males there. That was my impression. I think he feels safer with women around. I think he's probably slightly misogynist and thinks that women are easier to control. That's probably why he keeps them around. But the fact is, the cult is very egalitarian in terms of gender. There's absolutely no gender discrimination. We're all Titans, we were all big beings. Each of us was male and female 1 million times over. And so I'm going back. The CMO are mostly women, and when they come to the office and they want something done, it's not oh, guys, priority of this case. It's Kara, stop everything you're doing, drop your fucking folders, do this thing now. And okay, and the deadline is tomorrow morning at 12. And I'm this is a case that's probably going to involve 2,000 individuals that have to be investigated. We have half a dozen people. You want me to do this in 1 day? And then you find yourself in one of those bittersweet moments that I look. And I kind of feel this as a badge of honor, because you have to talk down command intention.
Right.
And you do that. If you don't do that, your team is toast. Because you're not. That's another thing. You have individual stats. Your team has stats. There's group stats. The whole base has stats. So basically, you can be punished because something happened wrong beyond the level of the base, but you can also be punished because something wrong went on the level of the team. So if I don't have a shouting match with the CMO, which I often did, my team is gonna suffer.
Right.
And that was probably the number one reason of contention, which I had, let's call it developed traffic. You probably heard this term. That was my developed traffic. Oh my gosh, CMO.
It sounds like some of your granddad coming out there in that situation.
Well, maybe I got punished a lot. Well, maybe not a lot, but that was the times when I was punished severely. It was because I wasn't following orders, usually because they were too hard or simply impossible, or because I told other people, no, this order is impossible, I will not do it. Please send the message back up the lines that this is not possible. And my logic was like, command needs to know the real situation on the ground. If the boots on the ground will not tell them how it is, nobody will tell them how it is. And if everyone is going to sweet talk everything, the problems will not get fixed. That's a very good and bad mindset to have, because you're going to get in some trouble. Also, because if you do it long enough and you're not thrown out, people are going to start to be slightly afraid of you. And that is something that, well, another badge of honor. I think I was the most hated man on the base by the CMO.
Like, people would see you and be like, oh no, don't come and talk to me. Don't come towards me.
Some of the CMO people, they were like, oh no, I have to go to that team again.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was like conditioning in both ways. My first time because at the beginning I was not the main speaker for the team. I was a minor guy that later I became the major guy in the team. Well, one of the two major people. So the CMO, yeah, that's something. Maybe about punishments now. You mentioned the ETF and the RPF. That's a good point to speak about it.
Yeah, that was definitely next on my list. Yeah.
EPF and RPF, they sound similar because in some ways they're both programs. It's not a place. It's not a prison. It's a program. The EPF is the bootcamp. The EPF is what you do when you join the Sea Org. And I cut that she was like something like 7 months on the EPF. That's hard. That's very long. Most people.
Yeah, she was so tiny as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason. She was too young. She wasn't living in the area. She was new to the cult, which is like being new to the cult and already in the sea. I saw people like that. That's not good. I also saw people who were from other countries, like they were native Spanish speakers, especially, or native Russian speakers. I speak Russian, as you probably hear by the accent. Yeah, I come from a pretty mixed background. So I dealt a lot with the Russian speakers. We also had people from South Africa, but they usually were very experienced before they came to the Sea Org, because they usually did stuff in South Africa. But the people from Venezuela and Russia, they had it like that. They had to learn the basics. It took them very long, and it was hell. And very often their green card would start to expire. And then we had the link to the Moonies. Because sometimes would be something like, oh, the green card is expiring, and this is a really promising member. Maybe we're going to get them married off to someone.
Yes.
Oh, that creepy old guy who never managed to get married to anyone. Let's marry this chick with him.
Just been speaking to several different Unification Church members who used to be in the church. And even the EPF and the RPF sound similar to programs that the Unification Church have, which are basically like boot camps that they send you to when you reach a certain age, or if you think or feel a certain way about the church, they just send you off to this boot camp to just basically like re-indoctrinate you like heavily over a very short period of time. So it's like years worth of subtle build-up and thought reform just kind of shoved into like a 2-week intense boot camp. So I definitely made a point to explain those two things.
Okay, so just wrapping up the EPF. Fred mentioned it in some detail and also Kat, so I will not go to very deep, but I will say that indoctrination is part of it, but it's not the main part. The main part is actually, it's like a Marine bootcamp. It's building team mentality. You're going to be an extreme extrovert. That's what they want. Everything is about the team. Everything is about do this, the group. Third dynamic, not second dynamic, not first dynamic, third dynamic in the group. And there's some physical labor, like what Fred mentioned. I don't want to invalidate what he said because he might have had a very different experience. For me, it wasn't abusive, but it was like a Marine bootcamp. It wasn't nice. It wasn't supposed to be nice, but it wasn't. People got out of their way to, shove you into this mindset.
Right.
If you watched Full Metal Jacket, you will the drill instructor. That's what you got.
Right.
But it was just that. It wasn't. Right. I didn't feel like they were trying to harm me. I felt like they were trying to mold me into something else.
Okay.
And it was. I didn't feel that to be very horrible. Later on, I was sent as punishment to redo the EPF more than once.
Gosh.
And I actually didn't have a problem with it. Because after sleeping 4 hours a day for prolonged periods of time, going to the EPF was, I wouldn't say it felt like being on the beach, but it didn't feel horrible. It felt somewhat better than management.
That's almost like when you speak to like victims of abuse who say like they received the paddle continuously to the point where they didn't even cry or shout or scream when they would go to receive their punishment because they're just so used to it by that point. And I know that's an extreme variation of what you're talking about here, but it's almost like you're so used to the EPF sort of as punishment is kind of what you were already living anyway with the sleep deprivation and skipping lunch to get the work done and everything is kind of like almost like the EPF could have been a break from that type of workload.
I'm just gonna correct maybe precise. Skipping lunch was very rare. It happened usually because there was some really big thing like something.
Yeah.
That was rare. Most times, you eat communally, so everyone gets sent. Skipping lunch was rare.
Right.
But not sleeping that was common. That was all the time. I would have to say that like having like 2 or 3 all-nighters in a row, that's not bad. Oof. That's you can still drink coffee.
Oh, I don't know about that. Sleeping, that sounds awful.
For me, the worst part was when you're sleeping like 3 or 4 hours each night for several months, and each night is like that. So then you're like constantly sleepy. You cannot drink. Well, if you drink coffee for several months, you're probably gonna have a sleep disorder. We would actually. I don't know who. I think it was someone from South Africa. I'm not. Someone invented this method that you, instead of drinking coffee, you can drink sugar water. Can drink water with some sugar poured in, and that worked much better because it gave you a kick.
Yeah. Yes, like what you give the bees when the bees get tired and you give them some sugar water.
And it didn't cause sleeping problems like
right.
Coffee. Because with coffee, when you're in this many months, not like one all-nighter, when you're like this period where you just slept for 3, 4, 5 hours every night, you drink coffee. You're up for like 5 minutes, and then you're more tired than you were before you drank the coffee. So you drink another coffee, and it's even it's a self-defeating situation. And I have to say that of all the things which I would consider actually abusive, sleep deprivation was the worst. Right. Sleep deprivation is the absolute worst. It's worse than losing your family. It's worse than losing your team. Oof. And I love my team. It's worse than everything else that happened. If someone would want to torture me and get information from me, sleep deprivation would be the best method. I would start talking on any subject with anyone. That's a Scientology skill to talk, to be able to talk to anyone about any subject. Yes.
Sleep deprivation is the one. Yeah, I mean, I have absolutely no idea how that would feel to have that little sleep months on end. All I can speak to is experienced from having a newborn, which was just such a shock to my system because
Might be similar.
well, you go from sort of being responsible for yourself, you know, having a job, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday sort of job, occasionally working weekends and evenings, but mostly being able to kind of sleep as long as you wanted. You get home from work, you can go straight to sleep, you stay up all night and have a few hours sleep. But when you set your own sleep schedule, you kind of feel okay about it. It's only when you're forced into a different schedule, when the baby's born and you have to get up on demand for the baby, whether it's every half an hour, every 4 hours, when it's not that cycle anymore that you set for yourself, it's so difficult to get out of that mindset of, okay, so I'm going to go to bed now and I'm going to sleep for 8 hours or 10 hours or however long.
Yeah.
Or it's a Sunday, so I'm going to go and lie down for a couple of hours in the afternoon and have an afternoon nap. Like it was the hardest part for me becoming a mother was just getting out of that mindset of I can sleep when I want, however long I want,
not
and
in
then
control anymore.
yeah, exactly. And waking up sort of, there's this thing called the 4-month regression where the baby is like learning colors and faces and moving, learning how to roll from the front to the back and learning how to sit up on their own and getting ready to start crawling. All of this information is so overwhelming that their sleep is disrupted, and they're having growth spurts as well and teething and all this stuff. So they wake up every single hour for about 6 weeks. Every night their baby is just waking up every hour. And that was so hard for me because me and my partner would take shifts, but then he used all of his holiday from work to stay at home with me and the baby when the baby was first born. That when this 4-month sleep regression hit, it was kind of at the start of the lockdown as well. So we didn't have any support from anyone else, and he had to go back to work. And even though he wanted to be with us so badly, he does night shifts occasionally. So he'd do 2 day shifts and 2 night shifts. And when he would be off on those night shifts and I would be up every hour with the baby, it was so hard. And that is obviously a choice. We chose to have the baby, and that was our decision. And he is obviously everything to us, but that sleep deprivation is soul destroying. It's almost like as soon as you put your head down on the pillow, it's almost like you're scared to fall asleep because you just don't know how long you're going to get that sleep for. You're thinking, is it even worth me falling asleep just to wake up again? And it's so anxiety inducing, that feeling, and this is nothing compared to what people in these types of high controlling situations experience. This is just a newborn baby who needs tending to, needs caring for and looking after.
You know that in 7 months it's gonna change.
Here is a quick message from today's sponsor. I wanted to talk to you all about an awesome new show I've been listening to. It's called Upper Left Corner, Pacific Northwest True Crime. This podcast focuses solely on true crime events that happen in the Pacific Northwest, highlighting not only the beauty of this part of America, but also the extensive list of crimes that have happened all around. Episode 1 starts off strong with host Emily taking us through the life and crimes of infamous serial killer Israel Keys. The episodes are singular, but the research and presentation gives us all the information without any nonsense. The thing that sets this podcast aside from others is that host Emily herself is straight to the point, but so engaging. It's also the production quality of the show. And there are 2 other key elements. At the beginning of each episode, Emily chooses a PNW town and gives us some brief history and insight into this place. And before she ends an episode, she gives a great wine recommendation to go along with listening to your favourite shows. For anyone looking for a new true crime podcast, Upper Left Corner is the next one for you. Go and check it out, subscribe and listen today. That's Upper Left Corner, PNW True Crime. Yeah, exactly. You know that this is not forever. They just need you there and now because they can't take care of themselves, and there is going to be a point where they can do that for themselves. So you're exactly right. But at the time, the shock
In
to
the
your
cold,
system, just not having sleep is just awful.
in the cold, that was one more thing, that it's business as usual. You know that those emergencies are not emergencies; they're business as usual, and it drove me angry. It drove a lot of people angry. I think I have yet to meet an ex-York member who would say, "Well, the management works pretty fine." No,
Yeah.
nobody.
Or
People
I
who
got a good
weren't,
night's sleep.
yeah, people who weren't in the management thought that management was the absolute, keystone cops, idiots, worst people ever. And when you're in the management, you then learn, no, it's actually again system. The system is so bad, and it's designed by Hubbard, supposed to know everything, and no, it doesn't work. Miscavige just broke it further, but he didn't create the original break, because people who were not in management and who left then say, oh, I think everything was perfect if they would run it as Hubbard intended, but Miscavige broke it. No, Hubbard broke it. Hubbard created it broken, and then Miscavige broke it further, but it was never great.
But when you talk about Hubbard, sort of, he's looked at as the person that knows everything. You mentioned in some of your writing to me that he actually travelled in or was a part of a thing called Crowley's Black Magic Cult.
Yeah.
So is that where a lot of this comes from?
I so want to talk about this, but if I may, I think it's going to be better if I speak about the Genesis myth first. Okay. Because if I speak about the Genesis myth, the Crowley stuff is going to be very clear for our listeners. And if I do it the other way around, they will it's going to be very confusing.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so you watched the South Park episode?
Yes.
So what you have there, imagine it's the Bible. So you would have, what you have there is like the story of, for example, Abraham. It's like the middle of the story, and it's not the most important part. It's not Genesis, it's not Jesus, it's like the middle part.
Yeah.
And even more, because every Christian knows the story of Abraham, but the stuff that you see on South Park, I didn't know this when I was in the cult. Never, because you learned it at OT3. And like I said, management is one structure, the spiritual teachings are the second structure. The people who have the money and pay for the courses go up, and they have OT3, OT5, up to OT8. But when you're on staff and on the York, you just work. You don't have time to do those courses.
No.
And Hubbard actually wrote this down. He said, you're the guys who are gonna sacrifice your own spiritual well-being, delivering it to others. He didn't make this analogy, but I will make it now. It's like you're going to be the Moses who sees the promised land but doesn't go there. You lead the people to the promised land, but you don't go there. Okay, so the actual Genesis story, which is probably the most important story in Scientology, and it's not the one in South. Okay, I'm going to run through Plato very quickly. One of the stories that philosopher Plato created is the story of the cave. So imagine guys that they're chained like slaves in the rowing ship. They just face one way. They cannot turn around. And they see this wall of stone, and they see shadows moving on the wall of stone. And they sit there so long that they forgot that anything else existed, and they think the shadows are the actual things. But we know that they're just productions made by people and other stuff moving there.
Yeah.
And Plato says, well, there can be one guy who kind of goes out, he sees the actual things, then he has to go back and he has to describe it to the guys who are chained. And this is one thing that is in Scientology. That is, okay, I'm going to put my words very quickly. It's basically that you're in sort of a matrix. That is not the ultimate reality. I will get to it later, but now I have to jump to Plotinus. He's the second philosopher. He's the father of so-called Neoplatonism. Sorry, I have to say that, but it's nobody. I don't remember anyone posting this on the internet.
No,
and this is very
okay.
important. Plotinus is a guy who he was an Egyptian. He lived roughly at the time of Jesus. He lived after Plato. And he took this metaphor of the cave, but he structured it and explained how this works in the actual universe. So he said the universe is created out of several layers. It's not like different dimensions. They all exist in the same universe. So the topmost layer is called the one. This is the infinite reality.
Okay.
This is everything. This is the undifferentiated reality. This is the all-encompassing everything. It's not a sentient God. It doesn't think. It doesn't have a personality. It encompasses everything. So there cannot be anything more because it is already infinity with everything. You cannot have second infinity. This is everything.
Mm-hmm.
So below the one, kind of created by the one, is the so-called pneuma. And this is the level of the Platonic ideals, the ideas like the number p or mathematical equations, etc., physical laws, the things that are always true regardless of what happens in the physical reality. Below pneuma is psyche, spirits, souls. Below souls and kind of created by souls is chila, it's matter, it's physical matter.
Okay.
It's the atoms. It's this desk. This is chila. This is matter. This is
okay.
Matter.
Yeah.
And now I'm gonna jump all the way to Hubbard. So Hubbard knew about this because he got it from a watered down version which is called Gnosticism. GNO, Gnosticism. Gnosticism takes Plotinus and dumps it down. I'm gonna be super fact. It dumps it down so it can be a cult for simple people.
Yeah.
It says because Plotinus said all those things exist in the same time, in the same place. They're all produced by one another.
Right.
And Plotinus also said, yeah, we're spirits, but we're also in the physical universe. And it would be very unnatural and bad if we would become just matter or just spirits. That's not how humans work. Gnosticism brings it to a very simple level. Matter is evil, spirit is good.
Okay.
And they say, well, we were always just spirits, but somehow we got enmeshed in this matter, and now this is we're in an evil state. We're in hell. This is hell.
Okay.
And we have to go back. Okay, now Hubbard.
Okay.
Hubbard knew about this because he was in this cult, and this cult that I mentioned, this was Aleister Crowley's cult, was linked to Gnosticism through Madame Blavatsky, an early mystic from the early 20th century.
Okay.
So what Hubbard did, one thing that he adopted are the levels.
Okay.
So I'm going to go down because Hubbard usually went from the lowest, the most simple level to the highest level when he was talking. I'm going to do it the other way around. This is the correct philosophical way around. Hubbard didn't do it, Plotinus did it. So the topmost level in Hubbard, this is number 8. It's called infinity.
Okay.
This is Plotinus's one. That's just the same thing. Hubbard didn't invent anything new here.
Okay.
7 is the spiritual level. This is psyche. This is, again, Plotinus didn't modify anything.
Okay.
And here is where Hubbard modifies things and creates new things. So he created level 6. We're on the 3rd level from the top. This is called the universe. And this is basically everything. This is life forms, matter, energy, mass. Matter, energy, time, and space. This is mass.
Right.
This is level 6.
Yeah.
Below level 6, we have just life forms. So just us and animals and plants. Level 4 is basically mankind. So that's all people. Humankind as a whole. Level 3 is the group. And it can be any group. It can be like your nation. It can be your religion. It can be your class. It can be the Sea Org. Sea Org is the so-called third dynamic. So Hubbard doesn't call them dimensions. He calls them dynamics. Second dynamic is basically sex and children and procreation. It's the vegetative thing. That's actually from Plato. And the first dynamic is the self, the individual. So now going back to the, let's say, major story. So Hubbard takes the major story from the Gnostics. He says, we are just spirits. We're always just spirits. This was the beginning of time. We are just spirits. And here is where he creates something actually original, because Gnostics usually do not explain it very well, or they have some sort of demon figure that causes it. that makes the spirits linked to the material universe. Hubbard does something very original. He says, we were bored. He says, well, okay, I'm going to give an analogy. You ever played SimCity or Sims or something like that, some computer game? So SimCity, that's going to be a good example. Imagine you're playing SimCity in a total full sandbox mode. You don't have any money, the people have no needs, you can build everything, you can build buildings on water, no limits. How long are you going to play like that before it starts being boring?
Yeah.
So Hubbard says, this is what happened. We were bored. So we created, he calls it games. By games, he also later will mean calls. I will get to that. So he says, we created games. We set ourselves a limit. We said, okay, now like in football, like in European football, you cannot touch the ball with your hand. That's a limit. You cannot go out of the field with the ball and stuff like that. So we created limits for ourselves to make things more interesting. And we started to play with other titans, other beings. Because we did it for a long time and it was attractive, it was fun, and it was engaging those other beings, we started doing it more and more. And at some point, we forgot that we cannot touch the ball with our hand. We couldn't touch the ball. We programmed ourselves so much that we literally couldn't touch the ball with our hand.
Right, yeah.
Other things that we did, we actually created the physical universe. And this is very Gnostic, and this is like Plotinus, because their matter is created by the spirits. So he said, we created the material universe, and we're playing with them sort of like with dolls, like with Ken and Barbie, yeah? And at some point, it was such a good role-playing game, we started to believe that we are those dolls.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where everyone is. We're now thinking that we are those quote-unquote meat bodies. We're thinking that we are in the material universe. We're thinking that only the matter exists. We're thinking, oh, the soul is contained in the body if we believe in a soul. And I'm going to quote Robin Williams because he was in a different cult, but his expression perfectly expresses what Hubbard means. He said, my soul is not limited by my body. My body is contained in the limitless of my soul. And this is the big story. Xenu, he's just one of those guys who's trapped in a meat body. It's not very different from me or from you. And the job is to go out from this, because Earth is a particularly nasty place, but even if like hell, Earth is the hell of hells. But even if you go out of Earth, out of this problem that we're now in, you're still in the problem of being in the material universe. You have to break out. And Hubbard said, well, Scientology is like the first step on that. I found a way to do it. I'm gonna guide you. I'm not the God. I'm the guide who will teach you how to become God again, because you already were there. So this is, and back to Crowley's cult. He got a lot of this from Crowley because Crowley got it from Madame Blavatsky. Madame Blavatsky got it from Plotinus. This is how it goes. Now the actual story, the historical event with Hubbard. Hubbard left the US Navy after World War II, where he didn't have a very good career. At the end, he was basically censoring other people's mail. He had a desk job. So he left the Navy. He was in a bad point in his life. I mean, he was separated from his wife, probably because of his own failures. He didn't want to go back to her, but he was separated from his wife. He couldn't find a very good job. He was a penny for word writer before the war. He couldn't find a good job after the war. He started writing to the Navy for disabilities, for various problems he created. He didn't have very serious medical conditions, but he tried to present himself as suffering more than he did. So his life was in pieces, let's be honest. He was very unsuccessful. And he met this guy called Jack Parsons. You heard about him?
No.
Okay. Aleister Crowley was the head of the cult. He was the guru. He was the cult founder. He was in Britain. He's one of your guys, actually. He was sitting in England's green and pleasant land. And Jack Parsons was his let's call him lieutenant in California.
Okay.
Jack Parsons himself was a very intelligent man. He was an actual rocket engineer for the military.
Wow, okay.
when you say rocket science, Jack Parsons did rocket science, and he did it very well. He was also a part of this cult. He was, like I said, very high in the cult, and he did something which I saw often Scientologists do, like rich Scientologists. He had a house which he would rent to people he liked, meaning usually other cult members or attractive women that he later wanted to bring into the cult.
Right.
And other such. He advertised in the newspaper that he's going to rent rooms cheaply to atheists and free thinkers. And he was looking for the weird people. He was recruiting, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And Hubbard fell for it. Very few people in the Scientology world, now nobody will mention this, but in the ex-Scientology world, people will also, they're kind of hesitant to mention it, and they're hesitant to interpret it, at least in the way that I'm doing now. So I'm being controversial. Hubbard fell for it, and he became just a cult follower. He wasn't a cult guru. He was a cult follower, and he was, let's call it, he was under undue influence. So meaning he was, call it, I don't want to call it brainwashing, but his cult thinking pattern for the rest of his life was influenced and changed.
Okay, yeah.
One of the things that's not in Plotinus, that's not necessarily in Gnosticism, but that was in Crowley's cult, is this magical thinking that I mentioned with Eris. That when you start thinking about something, for example, okay, if I start to think that I'm a great computer scientist and I can do anything, then I will actually start writing, the new version of Windows.
Yep.
And Hubbard fell into that. He also fell into sex rituals where Jack Parsons was the main guy. He was, as far as I know, he was the guy having sex with all the attractive women. And Hubbard would just take notes, or he would light candles. I don't think Hubbard got much action there.
All right, okay.
And he was a follower. And at some point, Jack Parsons had one girlfriend. Then he started having sex with the sister of that girlfriend.
Right.
Who became his, let's call it, unofficial wife.
Right.
And Hubbard got really friendly and close with her.
Okay.
So what happened? At some point, he also got promoted higher into the cult. He got into these levels of secret knowledge.
Right, yeah.
Pretty high. So at one point, Jack Parsons suggested that they're going to run a business together. Hubbard will travel to the East Coast. They will, with this wife, quote unquote wife of Parsons, they will buy yachts. They will sail the yachts to California because Hubbard was a sailor. And he was actually, from what I heard, a good sailor. I mean, when it comes to actual seamanship. And they will sell the yachts. And this is where Hubbard stabbed him in the back. Because Hubbard first stole his girlfriend away from him. And then he tried to run off with the money. There was a big row. In the end, Parsons kicked him out of the cult with this girlfriend. She was called Sarah Northrop, and she became Hubbard's second wife. Hubbard later had to ditch her because they had a giant fight. They totally fell apart. However, we have a diary of Hubbard, which he was writing shortly after he left the cult.
Okay.
And that diary sounds exactly like someone trying to deprogram himself out of the cult.
Okay.
There's things where he's doing okay, now I'm going to be my own guy. I'm going to do this. But there's also things where he's explicitly trying to use cult processing on himself, this magical thinking. There's pages where he writes I am the most sexy man in this country. Every woman is in love with me.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah.
And he's trying to use this positive thinking by writing it down. So some people interpreted this as basically that this diary was already written when he was in the cult and he tried to impress other people with this diary. From what I heard, the dates don't match up.
Right.
And there's also some things there which they really look like an ex-cult member and not an actual cult member. So my belief is that it was after, and my belief is that Hubbard was, oh God, it's turned off. Sorry, I have a phone call which I will not answer right now. Who calls me at this hour? Jesus. Anyway, my belief is that Hubbard was actually a cult member. He deprogrammed himself out of being a cult member. Some of those weird cult ideas stuck with him.
Yes.
But then he decided, okay, now I know how to be a cult guru. And he did that. If you want, I don't know how we're with time, but I can quote, I prepared this. There was a lecture he actually gave. I'm not going to read the whole lecture, don't worry.
Okay, yeah.
But there is a lecture which he actually explains what it means, how to create a cult, what it means to be a cult member, and how to take the cult apart.
Right.
He actually teaches people how to get out of the cult. The sneaky thing he doesn't call it a cult, he calls it a game.
Okay, right.
So he made literally, it was one day, he made a lecture, the two lectures. Okay, it was like he was giving a series of lectures in Philadelphia. It's called the Philadelphia Doctorate Course. Almost every person in the cult has to listen to it many times. Most people miss this. They don't get this point about the games. So on one day, he started talking about the games. He talked for 1 hour, then they went on a lunch break, then they was talking for 1 more hour. And in those 2 hours, he went to all sorts of rabbit holes, but in the middle, between those rabbit holes, he actually explained how to start a cult, what is a cult, how to get out of the cult, how to make other people leave the cult. And I actually listened to this when I was inside.
Right.
And this was the point when I was already very dissatisfied. And I was like, oh my God, Scientology is a game. I didn't realize it's a cult, but I was like, oh my God, it's a game. Hubbard told us it's a game.
So something happened in that moment where you didn't necessarily apply the word cult, but you thought, hang on a minute, alarm bells, something's not right.
And I'm going to give quotes in a second, but I'm going to tell you, he speaks about chains, about people being enslaved mentally in this lecture openly. He says things like, well, there are players, there are pieces. And I was like, okay, am I a player or a piece now? Because this is a game.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm going to start with some quotes. This should take 15 minutes maybe. Because like I said, it's 2 hours of him talking, but there's a lot of other things he says. So the important part, he starts with, the rules of games are as follows. Limitations on self and others. Obedience to rules. Unconsciousness of rules to add reality. We pretend the rules are real. ARC, unquote, ARC means basically good report, friendly attitude towards. So back to him. ARC with others to play. Pain as a penalty which will be obeyed. You have to have a penalty that will be obeyed, otherwise nobody will stick with the rules.
Oh gosh, okay.
Agreement to rules and penalties is necessary to continue a cult, a game. I can exchange cult and game in this. When I say game, I mean cult. When I say cult, I mean game.
Yeah.
And he says, oh boy, are they? Meaning, are the penalties necessary? So this is where he sets it up. The rules of cults are as follows. You have to put limitations on yourself and others, obey the rules, and boy, did he write a ton of policy letters and rules. This guy wrote more than any other cult guru, from what I know. And you have to have ARC with others to play. You have to be in good rapport with other members. There has to be love bombing. You have to be in a close-knit group. This is what the Sea Org is about. You're all about the group. Go, 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 go. You're all, gang-ho, we're all together. And agreement to rules and penalties is necessary to continue a game. Well, guess who was the one enforcing the rules? Well, that was me, among others. And Mike Render, and Osa, and all the other people in ethics, and also security, another enforcement department. Okay, next quote. There's a game called Freedom, which is what you're playing right at this minute. And games contain trickery and misdirection to win. Your 180-degree vector of have and agree. So, what does this mean? Everyone is playing the game called Freedom. And he says game called Freedom. So the cult will tell you that you're free. And this is what Hubbard says. He's saying, I am selling spiritual freedom. I'm going to make you free. I'm going to release you from the chains of matter. And this is trickery and misdirection, because this is not what you're going to get.
No.
Insane. Next quote. The necessity to have a new game coded before one ends the old game. Otherwise, everyone becomes the maker of games with no game. Meaning, if a cult falls apart without any structure, any new guy continuing the cult, everyone becomes a maker of cults with no cult. Meaning, everyone will have to start thinking for themselves.
Yes.
Free will. See what he's doing here?
Yep.
And
it's quite scary, really, that this is something that everybody's told to listen to as well.
you know, it's like this. When I was discovering it, I discovered it myself. However, there's a guy called John Atack, who was in Britain. We had no communication before. I was in the cult. He already left, I think, in the 70s. And he interpreted this thing the same way as I'm doing it now.
Right.
And he also wrote one of the most famous books on the topic. He wrote, "Let's Sell These People a Piece of Blue Sky." And I didn't know about him. He doesn't probably still know about me. And we came to the same conclusion. And this is why I'm telling you this thing right now. Because if it was just me, I would be thinking, maybe I'm reading stuff into this, which is not here. John Atack is a super intelligent person. And he's probably the most knowledgeable historian on the subject.
Right,
So
okay.
If he interprets it this way and I interpret it this way, I'm feeling really comfortable that this is what is going on.
This is what he meant. Yep.
And one more point, Hubbard was a narcissist, probably a malignant one. And if one studies, for example, there's a guy called Robert Hare. He wrote a book about psychopathy, like clinical psychopathy. Robert Hare is a clinical psychiatrist and psychologist. He worked for prisons in Canada, the prison system in the United States. And he said one of the things that psychopaths do is they like to show something he calls duping delight. So they leave obvious, or maybe not so obvious, but they leave clues for other people to see what they're exactly doing.
Mm-hmm.
And when nobody picks up on this, they kind of get great enjoyment out of this. They laugh. They say, "Oh, those people are so stupid. I am so smart." This is what Hubbard is doing here.
It's
Thousands
really,
of people
it's scary. It's and if people are told to sit down and listen, and they don't and they don't have the same reaction as you, or that the alarm bells don't go off. I mean, what more would you need to realize that something's not right?
To be honest, Hubbard taped, I don't know how many, probably months of lectures.
And you're just reading all of his stuff and listening.
You're usually listening to it, not reading it. And what I'm reading now is like spread out over a 2-hour lecture, and there's, like I said, there's millions of lectures. So you have to stumble onto this, and you have to be really awake when you're doing this, because if you're really listening to this after 6 hours of other lectures, it's gonna go over your head.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Hubbard has a droning voice when he wants.
I know. And everybody said he was so charismatic, but I don't.
He can be funny.
I didn't get it. I didn't. I watched some of these preachers and televangelists and I think, wow, that the energy that they give off, and you can see why everybody in the room is like riled up by these people, these speakers. Like even Jim Jones, for example, when you listen to him speak, and then I would listen to L. Ron Hubbard, and I just didn't get it. Just didn't get the same effect from him.
He's different.
He definitely is.
He doesn't like to appeal to emotions, actually, in comparison to other cult gurus.
I think even the way David Miscavige talks is more
energetic.
Yeah, and sort of riles you up a bit more than L. Ron Hubbard, but maybe he needs to do that because he's the quote unquote successor. And actually, on that point, you had your own theories about what you think might have happened to Shelley Miscavige, just because the episode that I'm releasing alongside this for the Conspiracy Vault, which is the other podcast episodes that I release, is an episode on Shelley Miscavige and the different theories that surround her and what people think have happened, and you have your own set of theories.
Yeah, I'm pretty much one theory. I will say that I don't know what happened to her,
Yeah.
but I will also say I am certain I have the good idea. There's a difference between knowledge and certainty. I have certainty, I don't have knowledge, but I have certainty.
Right.
So if you're in the most important thing to understand in this context in the Sea Org is that Sea Org is a paramilitary organization. It's like the Marines, just without the actual combat. A better analogy for people who studied history would be it's like the Teutonic Knights or like the Knights Templars. It's structured as a military unit. The culture is like a military unit. It has the looks and feel of a military unit, but most of the work done is actually administration.
Right.
However, it's still a military unit. So basically, David Miscavige is not just chairman of the board. That's what he's called. That's not how people see him. He's the commander.
Yes, yeah.
And he's an absolute commander. He's command intention. So, and what he says is command intention. And the CMO guys he sends out are command intention. And if you're married to a person like that, and I saw many marriages in the Sea Org, maybe not with, I didn't see Shelley, but I saw other people, and I'm pretty sure it's the same everywhere. Your first and foremost relationship is to the organization, and your relationship to the other people is defined by your post, your position, your rank.
Right.
And he's the boss of everyone. He's the commander of all. So he was for Shelley, he was her commander, first of all. He happened to be her husband, but he was first and foremost her commander.
Right.
I don't know what happened between them, that she fell out of favor, but it was obvious she fell out of favor for some reason. Maybe she did something in a way that was inefficient and created a problem because she was an administrator.
Uh-huh.
Maybe it was personal, although I doubt it, because from what I heard, David Miscavige takes everything personally, but he's not a person who he's not high on people skills. That's not high on his area of priority. I suspect she botched some project, or he thought that she botched some project, or for some or other reason he got mad at her. And he got mad at a lot of people. And when he got mad at people high in the organization, he would kick them out to like very low positions. He would put them in the hole, which everyone I think knows about right now. I didn't inside.
Okay, yeah.
Or, and this is something he also does, he sends them to faraway places that are locked away, that do not have contact with the general public and the police.
Yeah.
There is a woman who is now an ex-member, who was, because basically her father, I don't remember, he was some sort of important person, and he was out of the cult. And he was causing problems for the cult. So what they did, they sent her to the ship. Scientology still has a ship. They still operate a ship that goes out to the sea, and people have high-level courses there. So he sent her to the ship, and she was basically stuck on the ship. They didn't let her out to go out into the ports, etc. And she was stuck there for, I don't want to lie, but I think it was over a year. I think it was several years.
Okay. Oh my goodness.
And what I'm gonna say right now, this happens all the time to all sorts of people, to various degrees of severity. So when I was in LA, an order could come the next day saying, well, Karakorum, you're going to be deployed in Taiwan.
Right.
We're moving you to a different continent. And you're not going to be the ethics guy, you're going to do qual. Basically, you're going to be the supervisor of auditors.
Okay.
Like, okay, I wasn't even a good auditor. Why do I want to do qual? What happens? Trained or not, had it or not, you will make things go right.
Okay.
So, when you want to lose someone from the management, you want to get rid of them, absolutely, and you're the boss of everyone, you just give them an order. You just send them to some closed base.
Gosh, yeah.
You give them a task, and it could be a stupid task. Like I was speaking about desk jobs, but there are jobs inside the Sea Org which are not desk jobs. There's something called Golden Era Productions, which makes films and transcripts and tapes of Hubbard and like promotional materials and videos and ads and all sorts of audiovisual things. And there are Sea Org members there whose only statistic is like the amount of CDs produced. And they just put there and they work with the plastic and the things.
Yeah.
I think she was sent, I'm not saying she was sent to Golden Era Productions because that's too close to the international base. But I am saying she was sent somewhere like that.
Right, so to just do like menial work.
Menial, maybe it's not entirely menial work. For example, the transcripts of old interrogation that I was having, I never found out who was making those transcripts.
Okay.
And sometimes there were mistakes, so I wanted to complain, right? But I never found out who was doing that. And when I asked about it, and I asked about it several times, I always got the sort of don't ask.
Okay.
Oh, no, why did you ask about that? I'm going to pretend you didn't.
Okay, interesting.
So, and I still don't know. I asked Mike Rinder, who was, at some point, he was allowing people to send questions. I did, never got the answer to that one. So, I don't know, but there's a lot of jobs like that. And I think she was sent to one of the closed facilities. There's like one in Trementina. There's some other ones which are just gated. You know, people eat at the base, sleep at the base. They're in the middle of nowhere. They can go out.
Yeah.
She's somewhere there, and I'm sure she's doing something like transcribing those things, or painting walls, or writing, I don't know, procedures, or anything like that that doesn't involve contact with the public.
It's just strange. Do you think she'll be ever seen again in the public eye?
Perhaps if there is a formal, there's some sort of legal case where she will have to be a witness. And I won't be surprised if she's being quote unquote carted out. She's gonna go out. She's gonna say that everything is wonderful and David Miscavige is great and they're just in separation. Goodbye.
Yeah, maybe that wouldn't surprise me either. I mean, but at this point, she's been out of the public eye and hasn't been seen for so long that I feel like the urgency to know where she is has kind of vanished now. So everybody's just kind of like, yeah, nobody really knows, and that's it. Like, I don't know if there will ever be a pressing need for her to be in the public eye and to say everything's fine, I'm okay, don't worry about me, because I feel like that period is gone now. Everybody's just kind of made their peace with her just not being around, and who knows what's happened to her.
The cult will not bring her out unless they're literally forced to, unless they decide that's the less damaging option. Short of a court case, I don't see a reason why it would happen. And if she didn't leave for so long, I'm not expecting her to escape. Also, I'm just going to stress this point very strongly. There's many people like that. She's not the only person, quote unquote, missing.
No, but I think the interesting thing about that is she was in such a high position as the wife, and I don't know, they were seen as like such a power couple, and for her to just receive this almost same treatment, obviously I'm speculating because I don't really know what happened, but for her to receive the same thing as what happens to other sort of lower level members of the church, that I think that's what's really interesting and almost quite scary, that something would be done to her in her position with her status, I guess.
For me, that's absolutely not surprising. The higher you go, the higher the danger is. It's like being close to Stalin. The closer you are to Stalin, the more likely you're going to be a victim of a hurt.
I don't know. But what happened? What happened?
A lot of people are like that. There's a guy. I'm going to give a specific example. There's a guy called Hubert Jensch, who was a very high administrator. He was higher than Shelley Miscavige, from what I understand. And his wife is now a very outspoken critic. She left the cult. Their son died in the cult. She hates the cult. In comparison to her, I love it. She's the arch enemy.
Right.
And she was trying for the longest time to get information what happened to him because he was in the hall at one point. And he was missing, just like Shelley. Exactly. Nobody knew where he is. At some point, they made this, how it's called, welfare check.
Yeah.
So they finally made the police do a welfare check. And the police went there to the base. They saw him. They said that they saw him with a nurse. Nobody inside the cult gets a private nurse. That was not a nurse. That was an OSA handler.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm certain. And basically, this Hubert Jens said, "Well, yeah, I'm fine. Go away."
Right.
And then he disappeared again, and nobody heard from him since.
And that's kind of like what happened with Shelley Miscarriage,
Exactly.
where they ordered the welfare check. 2 police officers said, "Yeah, we've seen her, but she's fine. But that's all we're going to tell you, and we're not going to release public reports of that welfare check." And then that's it.
And I'm pretty sure that she probably told them, "I don't want anything released. I do not agree to anything."
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to understand that a lot of people inside the cult, for various reasons, they really want to stay there.
Yeah, that's the really difficult thing with cults in general, isn't it? The level of thought reform, brainwashing, whichever terminology you want to use. If you don't get, if there's no chance for you to have like just a good night's sleep, for example, or some distance or a break from the group, or for you to have that experience where you're listening to an L. Ron Hubbard lecture and you're like, hang on a minute, what? It's a game? Like, if people that don't have those experiences, why they don't understand or they don't come to the conclusion that something needs to change.
There's also people who understand it and they still stay.
Yeah, that's difficult, that, isn't it? What has your life been like since leaving, and what advice would you give to anybody looking to do the same? So they're my last 2 questions, really.
Average, I don't know. I had a period of adjustment, of course. I wasn't really in a position where, because Kat and Fred, if I remember correctly, they both routed out the correct way. I saw people in similar places as I was, and none of them could route out. Basically, I saw people who wanted to route out. I mean, I even interrogated some of them. And when they wanted to route out, there's a whole process. It's not a simple thing like saying, "I'm out." You have to go through various things there. And the cult can drag this on horribly. They can say, "Oh, you have to, do this with the auditor. We have no auditors right now." It takes years. I saw people who said, "I want to route out," and it took so long that they basically gave up. They threw their hands like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna stay."
Yeah.
And what is more, once you say you're gonna route out, they're gonna be very careful about what you're doing, and you're gonna have someone following you, and it's gonna be very hard to do something. If you want to do some weird things before going out of the cult, like getting rid of some evidence, maybe, or some documents. So let me put it just in those words that when I was wanted to leave, I was expected that they will not easily allow me to, because of where I was. And I don't mean the base, I mean the post. So what I did, I defected. Basically what's called blow. I blew, as they say. I don't like that word. I prefer the word defected. So I defected. I went out without permission. I went to, well, I'm not going to say where because that would allow them to identify me, but they knew where I was. They sent some people from various places, from some regs, some people from my team to recover me, basically. So they sent some people to recover me. Of course, they failed. And when I left, people were astonished that I left. Nobody thought I would leave. And the guys who realized I left, they were like, "Okay, he had a mental breakdown. He had some psychotic event. He's gonna be back. He's absolutely gonna be back.
Yeah.
We're gonna bring him back." And there was just one person in the whole probably base who knew that I was not going back. we were very close, not romantically, but we were very close. She was a girl who was, I will call her star because she was the rising and falling star.
Oh, okay.
She joined Sea Org probably as young as Kat did, something around that time.
Okay, yeah.
As a young team.
Yeah.
She went very, very high, above continental management. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
She got in trouble. I'm not going to say what. She got sent to the RPF. She spent several years on the RPF.
Wow, okay.
And she got out. And she was kind of a model member because she was perfectly controlled, no emotions.
Right.
She was at cause. She could do things. She didn't get upset really. I scored a victory whenever I made her laugh, and we made stand-up comedy in that team many times, basically.
Oh, awesome.
That was one way to relieve stress, and she had a very pretty smile. I don't remember her laughing out loud even once, but I remember her smile.
Right,
so
right.
We were pretty close. And basically when they sent her to retrieve me, she kind of walked in and she was like, "Hey, Kara, okay, yeah, you left and you're going to be declared."
Right, yeah.
She knew she was sent on a mission impossible. She didn't even try to talk me out. And that was a very short conversation. She went out. That was the last I saw her. Anyway, most people didn't think I would leave. And when I left, they never got her gamed very badly, but they caused some shit.
Yeah.
Minor stuff. So what can I say? I then got an education.
I would just find that so satisfying to be like, just watch me then. Just watch me not come back. I would find that so satisfying. You think, I'm not gonna leave.
That was very not satisfying. Yeah, because you have to understand that our team was really flooded with work. Each time I was sent.
Oh, I suppose, yeah. And I know you grow so close to your team, and
they were crushed by work each time I was out. And there was a giant bottleneck created, and basically I never completed one of those longer amends projects because they always had to bring me back.
Yeah.
It was like, Kara, come back. The sky is falling on our head. Sorry, your punishment is over. Go to work. Right.
Yeah. So you've almost
when I left,
felt the pressure to stay almost, probably.
Yeah.
For the sake of your team.
The sky fell on their head. The sky fell on their head, and they were crushed with work.
Oh.
And I know for a fact they didn't end up well. They went to some real, when they were sleeping 4 hours a night before, imagine what happened later.
Yeah.
And I felt very bad. That wasn't good. You know what felt good? Maybe that's going to be a reason why people stay. And I'm going to ask your permission to be slightly.
Yes, yeah.
And when you're an ethics officer, you get to interrogate people. And sometimes you meet and you get to know them really well, especially on the escalate level, because you take out their files.
Yeah.
And for example, I'm going to give the same example, like a guy who was supposedly doing quid pro quo, was abusing female members.
Right, yeah.
So I would find out about it. I would get some pretty credible reports. I would take his file. I would take his wife's file. I would take his dad's file, if his dad was in the call. I would read all his dad's confessions, everything his dad ever said, everything his wife ever said. I would check all his files. Why he married this woman? What was wrong in his marriage? What was right with his marriage? If he has children, I would check them. I would check the files of his subordinates.
Okay, yeah.
I would check his auditing sessions from years ago when he said, in the auditing session, people talk about their child for their long. So I just find the part where he broke his foot when he was 3.
Okay.
And then I would bring him in, and for the final interrogation, he was probably a person who already went through other ethics officers before, so he knew the list. I start to ask him the regular questions, and something like, instead of asking question 19, which you should do in Hubbard's theory, you should go question by question. So I ask question 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 up to 18, and instead of question 19, I'm going to ask, okay, tell me about the time you broke your foot when you were 3. And then his eyes go big, and you can see
because then
like
if you know that small thing, like you know everything.
Yeah. And then I go like, and I'm basically doing it as something as if it would be an auditing session, but before every interrogation you say, I am not auditing. So this is the formal thing you say. So he knows I'm not auditing. And I'm saying, okay, tell me again about the time you broke your foot. So he's saying, and then I can bring something like, okay, the one thing is wrong. The guy in the car, that was not your brother, that was your older brother. And he's like, shit.
Oh, that's so scary. That's so scary that you have that level of information.
And you can use that. And what is also scary is that you can kind of modify those things. You don't have to, when you're the beat cop, you have to do things by the book. When you're the upper level cop, you can do things which are not by the book. And in cold terms, if you're allowed to break the rules, that means you're in a position of power. It's a very obvious signal. Basically, I am upstart. I can do anything, you can do nothing too. And then basically you can just drill him forward, you can crumple him down like a piece of paper, throw him into the trash where he belongs, and you get the satisfaction that justice will be done. The bad things this guy did, you're the guy who's gonna fix it. You're the guy who's gonna make that. And to be honest, there's a certain level of pleasure you get just from the fear. From looking at those bright blue eyes, and they say, I am really afraid of being around you. That's part of being a cold cop. You don't get those sorts of kicks anywhere else.
That's like really telling, isn't it, about being part of the movement as well, and being in those positions of power and the effect that it must have on people.
Yeah, that's
terrifying. That's so scary.
For some people, they stay because they're saving the world.
Yes.
For some people, they stay because they get to be the action hero in their own movie. A lot of people are like that.
Okay, yeah.
Some people stay because they feel their eternity is at stake. They're afraid. Their own fear is the reason. Some people stay because they have this position of power. Some people stay like me because they can do justice, or they feel they can do justice.
But that's almost like going back to what Hubbard was saying in his 2-hour lecture around the game. He's saying that there are players and there are pieces. And then you're thinking to yourself, am I a player or am I a piece? Yeah. And then he's basically said in that lecture that it's the strong-willed people that can think for themselves that will work up the ranks, and this will work for them, but the weak-minded people, it won't, but they'll be the pieces that the players play with.
I'm going to give like a few very short quotes for him now, because that's exactly, I'm going to address what he meant. One quote. Now, the caste system of games consists of this. The maker of games, he has no rules, he runs by no rules. The player of the games, rules are known, but they obey them. The assistant players merely obey the players, and the pieces obey the rules as dictated by the players, but they don't know the rules. And then, what do you know? There's broken pieces, and they aren't even in the game, but they're still in the game. Who are the broken pieces? The broken pieces are what Jehovah's Witnesses would say, they're physically out, mentally in.
Yeah, physically,
the members.
physically out, mentally in. POMI, yeah.
Those are the broken pieces. There's the guys who are not in the cult, but they're still in the cult, and they're still participating in the success and structure of the cult. Now, quote, how to make a piece. This is how to make a piece. First, deny there is a game. Second, hide the rules from them. 3, give them all the penalties and no wins. 4, remove all goals. Enforce their playing. Inhibit their enjoying. Make them look like players, but forbid them being like players. This is really what he wants.
Right, okay. So it basically does reflect exactly what you've just explained there, with sort of people who enjoy the power that comes with being able to put fear into people.
And about closing, distracting, because he also says about dismantling cults.
Yes.
I'm gonna he says, like, first, on making games. You say that sounds like a very dangerous goal. Oh, no, it's not. Because what you do when you unmake the games is you get the players together and say, hey, what kind of a game would you like to play now? You haven't busted up the game willy-nilly. They were perfectly willing at the time you unmade the game for it to be unmade. Actually, you could play the game of unmaking games. So you could position yourself as an authority on deprogramming.
Yes.
You can run a live code called for ex-cult members. Another thing he says, do you realize the cruelest thing that can happen is for a game to deteriorate to a no game state where there isn't any game possible and everybody's stuck in it. And they've forgotten the rules and they don't know anything about it. That's what David Miscavige is doing now.
Right, okay.
Or like a cult that's taken over and managed by true believers. Jehovah's Witnesses now. Rutherford is dead, but the committee took over and they seem like true believers.
What is your stance now on like faith in general? Like, do you align yourself with any spiritual beliefs, or are you kind of like closed off from all of that now that you've experienced Scientology?
I'm not a part of any organized religion whatsoever. I still hold certain beliefs which I consider metaphysical. Okay. I don't feel it's interesting to talk about them because it's not. I don't believe in convincing people.
No. And what about Buddhism and the sorts of things that your grandfather would teach you when you were growing up? Do you still maybe hold some of those values?
No. Not Buddhism.
I just always find it interesting to see how people think and feel about spirituality after experiencing such abuse, after moving away from the movement that they grew up in.
Okay, so maybe I will say something. I basically believe I went back to Plotinus and Plato in some ways. I believe that there is matter, there is spirit, and I actually went to Plato and Aristotle directly. I skipped the whole Gnosticism. Gnosticism is stupid.
Okay.
That's my opinion. I believe that there is spirit and matter. I believe in so-called three, you can call them three sections of the soul or three souls. I prefer to call them three souls. There is the vegetative soul. That's the one that's responsible for basically breathing, existing. That's the thing that plants have.
Yeah.
There's the called sensual soul or emotive soul. That's what animals have.
Okay.
And there is the so-called rational soul, which is a very small part that just deals with the constructing abstract models, high math, this sort of thing. It's a very narrow thing.
Right.
That only humans have. Now, Plato wasn't sure what's happening with what really happens to the person when he dies. There's several beliefs. I'm following actually probably the most traditional Neoplatonist belief. The matter disintegrates, like in real physics, the atoms just go in various places. The vegetative soul dies with the body. The emotive soul goes to, let's call it a pool. So it's like you take a bucket of water, you put it into the ocean, and then you can pour another bucket out of it and make another bucket of water, but it's not going to be the same water. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, okay.
So it's not reincarnation like that. I believe there's this, let's call it emotive force that's flowing around. That maybe I have some that was part of some cat somewhere, but that's not. I'm not that cat. That's a total. A human or a cat is a complex being. We have matter. We have several souls. Right. And once those three things part, that individual ceases to exist. The big question for Plato was what happens to the rational soul. He thought that it maybe goes to interact with the ideas. I believe it dies with the body.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yep. So your experience with Scientology hasn't closed you off entirely from thoughts or feelings around spirituality and thoughts about what might happen after death and things like that?
No, but
okay, that's interesting.
I don't think those are very productive things because, thinking about things after death, because, like I said, the person who's talking with you now is a composite being once you separate the matter from those souls. Mm-hmm. The being, as you know him, stops to exist.
Yeah.
And what goes on is totally different.
And I suppose there's no way of knowing for sure exactly what
Nope.
will happen. So I suppose we could talk about it all day and not really
Yeah,
ever come to any
that's why
solid conclusions.
that's why I didn't really want to talk about it in the first place.
No, that's okay. So I guess my last question is before we finish up, what advice would you give to people looking to leave either Scientology or a group that has kind of similar high methods of control?
Okay. Can I make this a bit wider answer?
You can answer it however you wish.
So first of all, cults. Don't be afraid to make the jump. Fear is really what keeps most people in. For first generation, so for people who are recruited, it's a prison of belief. For second generation, it's also a prison of necessity because you might not have a job, you might not have family members outside, you might lose your family and your friends like I did. So it's scary. I know it's scary, but let me put it like this. Would you rather go through this scary thing and risk everything and then go on to lead a productive life? Or even fail trying to do something good? Or you can be forever stuck in a totalitarian system that hurts you, it hurts other people, it serves no good purpose. It's a wasted life. And here I would perhaps make a wider appeal to people in general, not just to cult members, because I think most people who are listening to this now are not in a cult.
Okay.
And I think as an ex-cult member, I have something valuable to say. Guys, I just told you how a prison works, how the prison of the mind works on this specific, with the game theory, etc. The worst prison, the most effective, and thus the worst prison, is the one where you don't see the walls or it makes you feel pleasant. It's a feel-good prison. And this is not exclusive to high control groups. I see people do it a lot outside in the big world. They often build prisons from themselves or have other people build prisons for them.
Okay.
And I mean prisons of the mind. So I would just ask everyone, don't assume that there are no walls just because you don't see them from where you're standing right now. Don't assume that there are no walls and no bars just because you feel good. Actually, look at the things that make you feel good. Look at the hobbies you do. Look at the groups you are in. Look at the church you are in. Look at your loved ones. Look at your children. Look at your husband, your partner. Look at your parents. Those things can be walls and bars. And they can be the worst walls and bars because they make you feel good. They make you feel loved. They bring meaning to your life. Don't be afraid to reach out and see if you can feel the wall. Try it. Because if you don't do it now, and there is a wall, you're going to find yourself 20, 40, 60 years later. Then you're going to bump into the wall and it's going to be a wasted life. Don't do it. Reach out, check. Because, when your head hits the pillow today, just think about all those people all those dead souls that are trapped in their prisons of belief, and maybe remember that perhaps you may just be one of them. Don't be afraid to check, and don't assume you're not in the prison. Because that's the worst part, assuming everything is fine.
I think that's interesting as well in terms of people that aren't necessarily in a cult or sect movement or group or whichever word you want to use, but people that use social media for that instant gratification, for the likes and the follows and things like that, for the rush of dopamine that you get from that, and then it wears off, and then you're like, oh, actually, that made me feel happy, but not for very long. And then the effect that social media could have on somebody else when they see a picture of somebody's quote perfect family, whereas that picture's just been posed for that post, and then you compare your life to other people's. And then there's also things like conditional friendships or conditional relationships, where you are basically in an unhappy relationship 6 days a week, but then one day you might have a day where your partner makes you feel good about yourself, or your friend makes you feel good about yourself, or does something for you, but then for the rest of the week, again, for the next 6 days, you're back to that conditional relationship on, like, well, we can have a nice day, but you have to do all of these first, or I love you, but only when you do this and this and this. So I think you're right there to tell people to reach out and test those relationships, and think about what would my life be like without that particular wall. Would I be happier? Would I be miserable? Especially if things only feel good some of the time, and when they're supposed to feel good all of the time. And I know that you said that that's not necessarily to people that are in cults, but also to people that are as well. It should feel good all the time when you do things for yourself. Like this podcast, every time I hit upload, that feels great. But the rest of the time, when I'm doing these interviews and I get to speak to people such as yourself over email, that still feels good. But the upload button, that feels great. So that's my little rush of dopamine. But for the rest of the time, I still feel, I still feel good. There's no part of it that where I'm like, this doesn't make me happy, this makes me miserable. And if there was, maybe it would be this type of thing that's a good example of where you would take a step back and say, well, hang on, if it doesn't make me happy, should I continue to do it to myself? And I'm sure people have.
I would say it even like a bit strongly.
There
are things which actually will make you happy almost all the time, and they're still wrong. Don't fall into hedonism. Hedonism is pretty dangerous, because that's the prison that makes you miserable half the time and happy half the time. That's the better prison. That's the more obvious one. It's easier to get out. You may actually, and I'm going to give a very extreme example, you may actually find a person who's very loving, unconditionally, great person, but for some reason he or she is stopping you or grinding you down at some level.
Yeah.
Maybe he or she doesn't want to, but the whole point of being with this person will stop you. And I'm not going to say that, practice disconnection like Scientology, but just don't assume that if something feels good, then that is automatically good. Don't confuse feels good with is good. That would be my point. Test it. Think about it. Don't just leave it in the corner of your mind, because at some point when you're going to hit this wall, it's not going to be pretty. I know I hit this wall many decades after, 2 decades over, when I started my path, and it's not pleasant. And I'm so happy I hit it after 2 decades and not after 7.
Yes, yeah, to have that, so late on. I mean, even after 2 decades, that must be so hard to deal with, and to kind of get yourself back on some sort of track or level.
Oh yeah.
But then every decade after that, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, I can't even begin to think how you would go about that. But especially because as you get older, I feel like things are more difficult. Like I only learned recently really what Reddit is. And I use it all the time. And I know everybody's probably like, stop mentioning Reddit in the podcast. But it's such an amazing tool. My partner used it all the time. And eventually I was like, what is Reddit? Can you tell me what Reddit is? Because you spent all your time on Reddit. And then he explained it to me, and he showed me some of the subreddits, and they've been so handy for research and reaching out to people and finding people to interview for this show. But, I'm in my 20s, and I was like, I don't know what Reddit is. So I can't imagine being 60, 70 years old and maybe not having access or the knowledge of these types of platforms that are so handy for research and reading other people's experiences. And it's not just Reddit, it's blogs and testimonials and just research in general on the internet.
Yeah.
So imagine having this experience in 60 or 70 years after.
Exactly.
And being like, what do I do? What do I do now? What do I do with this? Where do I even start? So I guess 2 decades is better than 7, but it's still, that's a hard road to go down.
Also, when you leave, even if you deprogram yourself, especially if you are in OSA, if you leave after being something like in OSA, or even in ethics like I was, there's going to be a certain stone that you're going to carry for the rest of your life, and that is, well, I was a soldier in the wrong army. And, it's not just that, I spent a lot of money on stupid stuff. You contributed, and your contribution stays as it was. You're not gonna take it back.
Mm-hmm.
You may do something good now. Mike Render started. Oh, you mentioned what should I suggest to people inside? Mike Render started, and PRME started, which is called the Aftermath Foundation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great tool because it's a place where ex-York members can go and can say, okay, I'm gonna start my life again. Could you help me?
Yes.
Because I don't have a home. I don't have a job. I don't have a CV. Or they simply can say, I want to leave, but I have real problems. I have family inside. What can I do?
Yes, yeah.
Though this is the best initiative started in the outsider community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Don't blame yourself, but I know you're going to blame yourself anyway. And that's what I'm going to say right now.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect way to sum it all up, really. I can't believe we've sat here for almost 3 hours and you've told me stuff that you didn't even tell me in the emails, and the emails were so full of information that I had not heard of before. So I don't know how anybody could doubt your wealth of experience or knowledge on this subject.
Oh, I think there are gonna be some people who will. I expect some people to say, okay, he's a total OSA age.
Well, I actually got told the other day that Xenu will punish me, so there is also that to take into consideration.
I think that's a joke.
Well.
No real Scientologist will say that Xenu is locked away.
Yeah, it was somebody on the Scientology subreddit said that they're not interested in listening to my podcast because Xenu will come and find me. So I don't know.
I'm hitting the sack. It's late here.
Yes, yeah.
Anyway, so thank you very much for allowing me to be here. Like I said, the soapbox, I really like having the soapbox, and I cannot be more pleased when it comes to you encouraging me to make this one more jump in my life, because I'm super grateful. Like I said, I listened to many other podcasts and people, and I never felt like, okay, I can do this. I can contact Chris Shelton. That didn't even cross my mind. I thought I was below that. And the way you led the interview, especially with Fred, that was the first one I heard. Like, okay, I can do it. And so thank you very much. I will send you an email with, maybe I can suggest some other people you could interview. Not sure if you're interested.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know people who know people. David Miscavige's father is outside of Scientology, and he's speaking out. So
yes, absolutely.
And he's such a cool person, from what I saw. I would suggest him.
Yeah, absolutely. If I could speak to Ron, that would be amazing. I've watched some of his documentaries, some of him speaking out, and I've got one of his books on the way, as well as one of Leah Remini's books as well. So plenty of reading for me. It's absolutely my privilege to have you here and speaking with me today, Cara. I'm so thankful, and I hope we get the chance to talk again soon. But for now, I'll see you soon.
Sure. I don't want to keep you for 3 more hours. Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
That is the end of this week's episode. If you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by emailing me at cultvaultpodcast@gmail.com or following me on Twitter and Instagram at cultvaultpod. I'm your speaker, Casey, and this has been the Cult Vault.